All right, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the September 20th meeting of the planning board. We'll start by calling the meeting to order and a roll call for attendance.
Mr. Chair,
No,
here, whatever.
just name, address.
Okay, address?
No, just name, okay.
Yeah, just.
Well, we're kind of virtual, aren't we?
Yeah.
Okay, Donna Masucci, Joyce Capiello.
Andy Malnikas.
Bob Tessier.
John Driscoll. Alan Front.
And Andrew Knapp, also present. With us for, our support staff here this evening are town planner Vanessa Price, code enforcement officer John Huckins, and planning and land use administrative assistant or administrator assistant, I don't know how to name it. Barbara. Review and approval of the meeting minutes. Yes. Voting, I would like to make a motion to, I will appoint Donna as a voting member of the Lincoln seat. Now, moving on from that, reviewing and approval of the meeting minutes. I had a handful of corrections from the meeting minutes, which I will actually just turn my entire packet over to Barbara. One of them that stood out there very clearly, I could see it was a correction that was made, but it carried all the way through, and it just needs, it ended up being a correction. Any other corrections that folks have? I'll pass right. And it's that you can know about? No, you can know about all of them. Did you read them? Did you read them?
Except for
I figured that was one of them. Here's what I'm trying to.
I do appreciate you taking the time to make sure you're up to speed. Appreciate it. Nice, thank you.
A green leaf.
All right, motion to approve the minutes as amended with corrections.
Second.
Okay, roll call vote.
Mr. Chair, Capiello, aye.
Andy, am I?
Tessier, aye.
Aye. Alan.
Yeah, fine. Private road, we have to review a request for a building permit at 79 Finney Way, a class 6 private road for Joseph and Cheryl Wilson, at 118 lot 4. Okay, if you wouldn't mind coming up to the table, sir. And I will turn it over to you to tell the board about your plans and projects.
Well, right now, we cut a ton of trees down to widen the road. Down by the water where the shoreline protection, I want a year with the state of New Hampshire. So I really can't do a lot down there, and there's a telephone pole in the way. But I'm spending over 10% of the project already, and I'm not even done. So
Want to tell them how wide you're making the road coming down to that one?
it'll be the 16 feet wide with the 2-foot shoulders all the way down to as far as I can. And it's pretty wide down there, but it's not. I mean, it's wider than, it's plenty wide enough, but it's not the 16 plus the 2 and the 2.
Questions from the board, anything?
The Skinny Way only serves 2 houses.
Or,
Right.
and luckily I'm the last one on the road.
And if I remember correctly, you have a pretty large parcel.
Yeah, it's 17 acres.
Yeah.
Even if you want to get a lot line adjustment, and why I mean was that you had a policy of this policy.
What you got? Anything?
Oh, it's 10%, it's still 10%.
Only 10%,
Mhm.
actually exceeding it.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the pathways to get it, get a permit, following the pathway, so.
Still looking for a motion to send a letter of support to the select board in favor of issuance of a building permit for 79 Finway.
Make the motion.
Motion made by second.
Who was the feedback?
John Driscoll, seconded by Ron Howard. Any comments from the public comment at any point?
We can't see if there's anybody that wants to speak on that.
And just
Is there any?
at this point, before we have a vote, I will open it for public comment to see if there are any concerns, comments, anything you would like to address about the planning board making their recommendation to the select board to authorize a building permit.
Mr. Chairman,
It's the board. It's up
yeah, I
there.
just I don't see anybody on.
Yeah, there's no one.
No comment from the room. At this time, I'll close public comment then, and I'll take the roll call vote.
Suchi, aye. Capello, aye. Thank you
And-
for coming in with a plan that meets the criteria.
Andy, am I?
Just for your eye.
Yeah, aye. We will issue a letter to the select board with the planning board support of your application. Thank you. Future application. It's your recommendation, thank you.
You can do it not here in 10 minutes.
That-
Gotta be-
Yeah, that's all right. Let's get it fast.
I hope you guys make it out of here over now.
Thank you.
As well.
Anybody on it in 10 minutes.
Although our hard, but John and I's hard work have gone through this process. And here we-
You know what to do. Okay. Reports from other committees. You want to start with our?
Sure. I can let you know that,
The next time for us was the plant conservation.
Kim Grossman, is here from the Conservation Commission. Wants to discuss with the board, enforcement on the existing wetland buffer, so you wanted to have a discussion with the board. Is here tonight, so if you'd like to come up, whatever's more comfortable, the podium or the desk,
I just said.
absolutely.
Willing to make you stand if we don't want you to be here.
I'm gonna turn 80 next March. Yes, I'm entitled. So. Didn't write anything. I was just gonna have an informal discussion with you and tell you what I want and see if we can have that. But, I opened up my email and Barbara sends me stuff from the planning board's going to be looking at. And sure enough, you're going to be looking at, and the Conservation Commission is going to be looking at a request for a special permit through the 9.6 process that you're familiar with. And I don't know if any of you have looked at it yet, but I can tell you it's not going to be a rubber stamp. I know you're going to want to talk about it when you see it, and I know the Conservation Commission is going to want to talk about it when you see it. And I thought, wouldn't it be nice if there's less to talk about? You know, if the process of getting to a 9.6 were simplified in some way. And so let me give you the background about how that might be possible. And let me preface it again. I'll start over again. In the last couple of years, the Conservation Commission has kind of enjoyed the relationship with the planning board. We know that you're the decision makers. We give advice, but in the last couple of years, we feel like the advice we've given has been heard, not always agreed with, but heard, and sometimes adjustments to plans have been made on the basis of comments that we made. And we appreciate that. So last year, I was thinking about that. And I was remembering that, I think 5 or 6 years ago, the Conservation Commission and the Planning Board disagreed about some decisions that were made in terms of whether to grant special permits. And so the Conservation Commission sat down and over a few meetings talked about proposing something to change the ordinance around 9.6 in a way that some other towns have done by having something called a function-based ordinance. So that when you looked at incursions into wetland buffers, there would be some criteria for doing that. And we looked around, the town of Ringe, the town of Kingston have such a plan. And we kind of, we're amateurs, we kind of scrabbled together a proposal and sent it on to the planning board, but I think it was November. And maybe because it was November, but maybe because we disagreed, the planning board at that time said, no, we really are not interested in that. And the Conservation Commission thought, well, you know, should we go the petition route on it? And we thought, no, we're not going to do that. It's getting close to town meeting. We'll come around again with another planning board at some point. And we didn't. Other events intervened. But a couple of years back, Marcia Gassis, who was town planner at the time, remembered that discussion and thought there would be some promise to doing it and some advantages to everybody for doing it, not just the, you know, Conservation Commission looking after the resources, but also the planning board looking to not having to make, you know, decisions that at times appear subjective and based on, you know, personal testimony and so on. And when I discussed this with Marcia, she's like, you know, the 9.6 process is not an automatic thing. We put applicants through a lot of discussion before we get to that. But we thought, well, maybe there's a way to, you know, through a plan like that to shorten it. So she asked a couple of members of the planning board at the time to sit down with a couple of members of the Conservation Commission and talk about this. And we had a couple of meetings, and lo and behold, we're kind of on the same page. We thought something like that would be a good idea. But we realized pretty quickly that we weren't the ones to do it and that we could use some professional help with it. So Marcia asked a couple of people who were professionals in the field to work on it. And both of them said, now we're too busy. We wish we could, but we're too busy. And so, and then also about the same time, the state legislature was working on something statewide that might be helpful, which, as things sometimes do with the state, kind of fell apart. So it kind of languished. And last January, jumping to another thing, the planning board last year was dealing with some changes to the ordinances. And a group of petitioners came forward wanting to make a change to one section of it. And there was, although the planning board ultimately worked with the petitioners on that, it only covered a small portion of the issue of wetland buffers. And and it was a little uncomfortable. And I was at that meeting, and my input on it was, although the Conservation Commission also supported the petitioners ultimately through the discomfort, I said, you know, maybe we could, going forward, work on something more comprehensive. So life has been busy for me. It's been busy for you. But a month or so ago, I picked up the phone and called one of the folks, one of the professionals who had been asked to work on this project now about 5 years back. And I said, Mark, his name is Mark, you have time to work on something like that now, if I can persuade the planning board to work with us on putting that together. And he said, no, I don't have time to do that now. And I said, how about if you had 18 months? And I guess that's what I'm gonna ask you about tonight. If we had plenty of time to work on something like that, could a couple of you sit down with a couple of people on the Conservation Commission, talk about this, see if we're on the same page and would like to go forward with something like that, and then perhaps engage. Oh, did I say that Mark said if he had 18 months, he'd be happy to work on it? I had skipped that. He said, sure, 18 months. We can move mountains in 18 months. And so whether we could sit down, talk about this a bit, see if Mark or somebody like him could help us to actually put a package together, convene again as a subcommittee, talk about it some more, see if it's something we all like, and then finally put it before town meeting in March of 2024. And those are my thoughts. What do you think?
I had a thought, I mean, rather than a person board member, I want to persuade Jeff to work with these guys. I think Jeff was probably our most knowledgeable guy on this area. And he's not on the board anymore because of time constraints. He's got some personal issues himself.
Jeff?
Brand, he was.
He was
vice
working
chair.
with us 5 years ago.
Yeah,
on
he's
that.
very knowledgeable on wetlands issues. He's very knowledgeable on regulations. And if we can persuade him to engage on this, I think that he'd be a valuable resource.
That document was done in 2012 by Jay, the lawyer in John Screw, the 9.6. So I think what we have is pretty legal, right?
Oh, it's totally legal, but what I think you're asking is, you get a professional in so that when an applicant comes forward, they lay out what the functioning and the values of those wetlands are. Because the more values and the more functions they produce, the more that you want to make sure that buffer gets protected. And if it's one that has less values and serve less functions, then maybe it's okay. But wait, that's what I'm getting out of what I think you're saying about.
That's it. I didn't want to get too
But I mean,
into the weeds.
so I think
But
that
that's,
doesn't,
that's exactly what we're talking about. I mean, wetlands protect us from floods, they harbor wildlife, they protect groundwater, and sometimes they're really pretty.
there's some that serve a lot of functions, there's some that don't serve.
And some have multiple functions, and the idea would be to have a system that looked at those things when an applicant came forward. And some wetlands aren't so high, and some of those buffers don't really buff anything, because even if they're not paved with concrete, they might as well be. And, you know, those have less value. And so the idea would be to have a more nuanced system of evaluating that.
Something a little more.
And it'd be great to have Jeff back again. But having said that, the reason to have someone from the planning board involved is that ultimately what we want is for the planning board to be who puts this in front of the town in March of 2024. So the planning board would have to love it or like it.
Just for engagement.
Yeah, so the idea, Jeff, it'd be great, but it'd be great to have somebody else.
I'm not saying just Jeff, I'm saying Jeff.
Yeah,
Jeff would be good.
yeah, but buy-in from the planning board is, I'm not here to bang my head against the wall. I'm looking to set up something that might result in buy-in over time.
So I think to feed off of this, I think that we're on the same ball page, same ball field, except for what Ken's looking for is we can get a couple of planning board members, a couple of conservation members. If you want a couple of residents from outside to probably be part of it, then that could be where you bring Jeff in. But the whole concept is for the two boards to come to some type of consensus on what's realistic to do, how you should go about it and make it reasonable. And he thinks the committee would serve that purpose. That's what I get out of what you're trying to say. That's why you would like to
Right, and
keep
if we
the
need,
two boards involved.
yeah, exactly, and then if we need technical support, which I suspect we do.
You would have to hire,
Then we.
Mark Jacobs is gonna charge. He's not gonna do it for free. So we gotta
He
make
said
sure we
he'd
have a
give, he
budget.
said he'd give us a discount.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Mark, for your background, Mark actually lives in town. He was on the Conservation Commission for a long time. He helped get things all started in the very beginning. So, I mean, Mark's been involved in the town for
And he's,
20 years probably.
yeah, and he's a property owner in Barrington.
That's what I'm saying. So it's been like 20 years he's been involved with that, maybe more than 20.
Right.
What is his,
He's a wetland scientist.
Well, a soil scientist general, yeah.
and essentially, my take on this is what you're looking for is for the Conservation Commission and the Planning Board to sit down and develop a scope of work that Mark would then essentially adhere to in helping write up and create these guidelines.
Mhm. Yep.
And then, obviously, with there being a cost to it, we would have to seek funds from the select board to allocate a resource funds to that.
Can the Conservation Commission use their?
You got all the money.
Right.
You guys
Or the
got- you guys got a lot of-
Well. The select board, it hasn't been a secret that the Conservation Commission is interested in this, and yeah, funds would have to be.
Security.
So you were talking about taking templates from other towns that have already gone through this, like Kingston and so forth.
Yeah.
So I guess determining the function of the wetland
Mhm.
Would be just a soil scientist that would require that the applicant would hire to do a functional test. It would be up to them to do that.
They've hired one anyway. Yeah, they do.
But I mean, they don't determine that this is, I mean,
In the past, they've had some where they say this is the high function, but I give all the reasons why.
right,
And then usually when they come in and do a testimony, it's like, okay, this wetland is a wetland because it's connected to the other wetlands. It's really just a drainage swale and serves no function.
right,
That's when they come forward on that because they're trying to get something for their client.
right.
But they also have to meet the requirements of their licensing where they can't come in and tell you it has no function when it does. So
Well, could we just get the CMA could determine that?
you would actually want them to have their soil scientists bring forward the facts to why they came to that decision. Like I've seen they review it.
Right.
Not sure how detailed they are with wetland and stuff, but I'm sure if they don't do it in-house, I'm sure they probably have someone they can contact to do that.
Right. Because right now, we get these encroachments, we say, we have to see the encroachment on them, but maybe some of
There's
it.
been a couple that we've caught for encroachments and then come in front of the board after the fact. Usually they're only in by a few feet. Most of them come to you before they do any stuff
Right.
because people do try to follow the
Right.
rules. You do have one coming in that's got a little bit of impact that's existing. It's on your agenda. You guys haven't got the packet yet, but it is gonna come into you. I'm not
Right.
sure if you've seen that one yet.
And the one we're doing the site walk tomorrow on.
Right, and that one doesn't have any impact yet, but he's talking to you before because he's trying to do the right thing. And when you go out and you do that site walk, you look at it, you can kind of get an idea of, like Ken said, it's hard to explain it all, but when you get into it, when you start feeling how different invertebrates live and their indicated species, that's the whole thing. A lot of it comes down to like vernal pools because of the different systems and stuff. And then also that during flood season, how it's able to absorb and release the water so you don't get downstream flooding. So those are the ones that hold them higher functions. Those are the higher values. Those are the ones you want to make sure that are protected. The ones that happen to be almost like a drainage thing that connects over, those ones that are important. If you get close to one of them, you really haven't hurt the function because they're still operating the same way, but I'm not an expert. I can't tell you what they do and what they do. I understand the concepts, but I can't go look at it and say this one does this or this one does that.
I'm just wondering about the 18-month process, if it's,
Well, it just seems like March 2020
yeah,
Great.
you just bring it up.
is tomorrow,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And this might not be that, I think it's important.
Oh, I
So
do.
when I say it's not that big a deal in terms of total hours. It might not be that great, but, again, it's, hi, it's October.
A couple of us have just been on the board since April, so we're brand new to this. But,
Yeah.
the first.
Should be a great committee to get your feet wet.
I know. I do volunteer. I'm retired. But, the first one of the early ones we faced, the fire department wanted a 20-foot road around these buildings, right on the Lee line. And they had to encroach on the wetlands and put swales in it because it's a slopey area. And 16 feet would have been fine, we wouldn't have any encroachment. Now, but we don't know the value of that wetland buffer that was there. That was part of the problem. And it'd be great if each one said, can we get the report because this is an A+ or a B, whatever criteria you use. Certainly make it easy for us.
That's perfect because,
Yeah.
If it's really important,
Right.
I say it out loud, you might disagree with the fire department on occasion.
But it's true, but
But
we're here.
But you'd want to have
We see
parts to do that.
Or the developer would have to rearrange things to try to accommodate things a little more squished to one side. They might have to go to the ZBA and ask for a variance on setback on one side so everything could shift and protect the buffer. There's give and take. There's multiple ways to do things. It's just sometimes it involves more steps.
Right. But just since April, there's been a couple of them where each one seems to encroach. Now we have, you said, one in the wings and
Well, I mean, you
the
got one. you're looking at,
road
two side
going
road.
up, right? And we're gonna see tomorrow. It just seems like, just seeing these things out. Have you ever thought of a petition article to raise it to 75 feet?
They petitioned it and moved it this
Well,
past.
the thing is, the distance on the buffer is not the issue. The 75, the 50-foot buffer gives a protection, so that's not the issue. The issue is when you allow them to be closer than 50. So you can say 75, and if you're allowing 10 feet from it, whether you say 50 or 75 becomes irrelevant because you're still talking 10 feet if you give it the relief.
Well, the
So it's all
75 would
about the
be-
relief.
The 75 just would mean, wouldn't mind giving up 25 feet for their road. This can be back,
Well, now you'd be back where you started, which is, it doesn't really serve a purpose. And that 50 feet, when it was looked at,
Right.
they looked at, there was a lot of, research and science done to it. And that's how that 50-foot come up, and it actually come out to more like 35 feet, but the 50 kind of gave you that.
The
buffer.
point I'm trying to make is, this sounds like a much better system than doing something arbitrary, like trying to increase it.
Yeah, well, the thing is, you have to give relief. There is, state law
Right.
requires you to give relief, so you gotta have a relief program.
Mhm.
So I don't think Ken's talking about increasing the buffer. He's
No,
talking
no.
about when you give
No,
the
John.
relief to have a good reason for your relief and justifying it and still making sure that you meet the intent of what the regulation.
Either John or I want to do 75 feet, and John is agreeing with me.
No, I was just tossing that out to say this seems like a
Agreeing
much
with me,
better
that's something
plan.
more systematic.
And determine the value of each one.
Right, I think that.
Or
Yeah.
with more of a science basis would be good.
Right.
And
And part of that.
John volunteered, the board will approve it, to sit down with me and one of my
I'd be
colleagues
happy to.
and somebody else maybe, and
So my general recommendation would be to sit down and put together a scope of work
exactly.
to bring before all of us to look at and agree to, and then we can submit a letter to the select board requesting funds, or if we can get an estimate, like start putting together what it would actually take to compile an estimate, how many hours we think are gonna be invested in this, what that's gonna take, but that all comes off of a scope of work.
And this, by starting early, I think that gets you in that.
That's why I'm-
Yeah, I
18 months.
support that idea. I mean, I don't have any issue with that. I think that would be a good way to do it. But I can't say I would fully support a committee until I have a scope of work to go off of.
I'm uncomfortable with me being who produces the scope of work without some input from the planning board. So that's why I'm asking for. I mean, committee sounds very formal, but to sit down, to sit down with, perhaps with staff and with Vanessa, with
Maybe we
Somebody
can ask
who-
Mark Jacobs to come in and meet with us on a staff level to see what he's thinking and what he thinks his cost will be and what the process will be and what he feels the outcome will be. And maybe we could report that back to the board.
Yeah.
So I met with, Ken before this meeting and suggested come before the board to do, we wanted to do like a joint meeting. Maybe like I said, not with everybody, but a couple members, so staff would be present at that meeting because it's a joint public meeting. I do think it's from planner's point of view that it would be beneficial for both to come together to do it, figure out a scope of work. Because like you said, he doesn't want to necessarily be the ownership of it, like a partnership. I don't think he's looking to approve maybe to move forward with that, but to come up with a scope of work for Mark to do. And perhaps cost share the, whatever that scope may be, because we do have, for our land use, we do have a budget line for consultant work as well. So that's something to consider. The board, I know they have funds, we have funds. I don't think that, talking with administrator that, the select board would probably feel a little bit better to approving that, like if it's a split cost as well, because it's a joint effort. So I just wanted to let you all know that we had met before and kind of discussed that would be a good collaboration. So before it didn't seem.
And we could get input from the towns that have already gone through this and using this process. I think that's, there's no, you don't try to reinvent the wheel.
Yeah.
Right.
Just grab the ones that seem to work best.
Well, when I think of a scope of work, I mean, and pardon the expression, but this will ultimately be beaten with death by committee, so. A scope, even a scope of work is gonna come back before all of us to look at and line item up, so. I mean, a rough scope of work from any one organization is gonna become a blended scope of work from both organizations. And it's gonna end up with town planners input, code enforcement's input, our administrative assistant's input. You know, plus the conservation commission's input, the planning board's input, and I'm sure the select board will probably have some input that they wanna plop in there as well, so. I guess
Maybe we
that's
should start with, if we could get those other towns that have this type of system, bring forward what they got so everybody could review it to see what it looks like about maybe going forward. Instead of reinventing the wheel, you might not have to hire a soil scientist as a specialist to come in and go over it. If someone's already got parameters all laid out and then the applicant would have to hire their wetland scientist or soil scientist to show how they comply with each one of those things if someone else has something already.
right, a scope of work has probably already been developed by somebody.
That's what I'm saying, so you can steal their work. That's the way to put it.
That is all right.
Shamelessly, yeah.
Well, it sounds like they were willing to share.
So maybe that first step would be to see if we can't come up with those other municipalities, so everybody could get a look at them. And then you could determine from there how you'd like to take the next step, and maybe Ken can come back in when you have that.
Vanessa, are you on the planners link? That's the question there.
You might get all kinds of stuff back in many municipalities.
Yeah, I actually, I mean, not to put too fine a point on it, but I did that. And it's somewhere in my hard drive. It's really,
We just gotta figure out where it is.
no, I did. I checked out those other things and I stole their stuff and wrote something up with, you know, with the approval of my colleagues at that time of the Conservation Commission. And, you know, brought it to a now ancient, planning board that really wasn't open to talking about it.
You saying last November?
What?
No, I'm saying.
5 years.
5 years ago.
Some of us were here 5 years ago.
Would that, you get into the conservation, would that be in your minutes, which you've done a statement?
Usually.
Because I can look it up.
No, I mean, the document itself
Yeah.
is somewhere on my hard drive. If that's a direction you want to go in, sure, I can show you what's done. But at the time when Marcia brought together a couple of people from the Conservation Commission and Jeff and somebody else, I can't remember who, from the planning board, we decided that little committee decided to talk about the concept, and over the course of, I don't even think it was 3 meetings, I think it was 2, to say, yeah, this is a good idea, but we should have a soil scientist or another kind of environmental scientist get this just right and spend some time with it. I don't know how much time, but and bring it back to the small committee, who would then go back and bring it to the planning board and so on. And the planning board is the body that proposes changes to zoning ordinances. So, you know, I make sure that it has to go through as many people as you might think. It might not be that complicated. But look, listen, you're in charge. I'm gonna go with whatever direction you recommend.
I just find if we go through all the committees, then you create the support and buy-in that you want. So when it goes to town vote, it goes much smoother that way.
Sure. Yeah, that, I totally agree, which is why the Conservation Commission at that point said, oh, if we don't have the planning board even interested at that time, you know, we have other things to work on. And we were gratified a few years ago when, you know, yet another planning board said, sure, we're interested, but we want to get all our ducks in order. And I appreciate that. And I would appreciate that if we can work on that some more. So any way you want.
I'm in support of getting a scope of work together to bring back before the board and discuss like what that would look like, what our scope would be.
That way you can give a direction to the committee on what you want to do.
Right.
But it would take some members to sort of create that, right? Or to take what you have and bring it up to date.
That's what's supposed.
Yeah.
So we need a couple of volunteers, I would say.
I think once that scope of work's determined, then you would want your volunteers to start, make your subcommittee.
Right.
Because I think the way Andy's talking about, correct, he'd like to know the scope of work before he starts. the
Before you even
committee.
start.
Right.
So you can think about joining, you know, by the time the scope comes around.
Who's gonna do the scope though?
I think he wanted Ken to bring in the idea of the stuff that he brought before, and the planning board could look at that stuff and say, here's what we feel needs to be done in order to accomplish this, and that would establish the scope. So that sets the direction for the committee. Here's what we want you to accomplish.
Okay, so that'll be the starting point. We'll look at that and then we'll make decisions.
I mean, that's how a lot of them have been done in the past.
Okay.
I feel like you gotta have a starting point.
You gotta give the committee a direction. If they don't have a direction, they just meet.
Right.
You're wasting people's time. And I don't want to waste anybody's time. I know enough of.
And there may be more towns that have adopted this in the past 5 years. What you have from way back then.
I don't mind looking and helping Ken on that, like,
Yeah.
putting it out there to kind of see if Sam. But I have got some time to look at it. But if you already done a lot of work, I don't want to take that away from you to do that
Yeah,
effort.
well,
So,
So are you offering to chat with me some more about this?
sure.
And then we'll see what we
Bring
can do.
me.
If Vanessa
What
has the time and is willing to do it, I fully support her committing her time to the Conservation Commission to help get a drafted scope of work together or an outline plan for a scope of work so that the board can review it, and then we can form a committee that has a kind of a draft plan to work from with a what's the word for it? Not a challenge, but a direction. A directive to go after, and then we'll set a plan and, you know, like, what does that look like to get us to a milestone from with a target of 18 months from now to have a warrant article drafted and written that makes Conservation Commission happy and planning happy.
Yeah, so to get it on the agenda to make it work, you probably got more like 15 months from this point in time.
Yeah.
Yes, you know, just to be realistic, you know.
the tyranny of the urgent will be.
Yeah, it comes in quick. It comes in very quick. I can't say. It sounds like a long time up. It's not.
No.
Okay. We'll
We'll
call.
talk to them.
All right, and John, thank you. And the others, we're silently.
We'll see.
I saw a hand up
We'll see
over
what he
here.
calls.
Ken, I do have a question for you.
Sure.
So we've been really trying to make sure as we do these sidewalks, we let the Conservation Commission know. That we're doing them so that you folks are participating in them and you get to kind of look at what we're looking at. I want to make sure we get a write-up or feedback from you folks before they end up back in front of us. So is there something we can do to support that, to make sure, one, you guys know, two, you get to you participate in it, and then three, we get a write-up or feedback with your input?
We'll take a step back, as town staff, attend the meetings, everybody's there and then
Right.
do meeting minutes. It should be for clarification purposes, is what the sidewalk is. Are you looking for more?
Well, I was,
From Conservation Commission.
I'm just assuming that is they go look at it and they have a follow-up meeting, they may have more discussion that they have on it, and I would like the feedback. I would like to know that we're doing them with a meaningful purpose. I know we find a purpose out of it, but if I come back to it and we've had everybody there, but then I don't have any feedback coming back in from
So,
the commissions.
so in the one that was on the 11th,
Mhm.
we didn't meet in the interim.
Right.
And one of our commissioners who was there made some comments, which I passed to you, and which I guess you'll pass to the board.
I know you had your meeting come up.
Well, yeah, there was, we kind of lost the meeting when, you know, when
Yeah.
the building thing, we kind of were surprised that some things came up, which is unusual. And then there's a sidewalk tomorrow, and some of us will be there. We meet the following night. We'll discuss it the following night, and there'll be feedback before, well, almost immediately.
I just wanted to see if there's something more we could do to make sure we're getting your folks' feedback so that we're truly reviewing that.
Other than saying that's on me, I'm the chair, I need to make sure it gets there. You know, if it doesn't, then I don't. So I make an effort.
Yeah.
If it's missing, let me know.
So the concept now, when they set up a site walk, the way the information is given to you and your group, so they know that site walk's going on, that's working so far.
Yeah, Vanessa lets me know that this.
So that's all working. So basically the setup is kind of working. I guess, that's kind of what you were asking. You just wanted to make sure that you guys were aware, you were knowing what's going on. You got a chance to get feedback to the board before they made a decision. That's why I think.
Yeah, and we actually, some months back, we used to meet on the first and third Thursdays, and we were missing. We were sometimes not able to provide feedback before the next planning board meeting. So we switched second and fourth, which works better because we're closer to your first Tuesday. And we did that on purpose in order to do a better job of that.
And you'll have hard copies of the plans for your meeting.
Yes, and I was gonna send you a memo and say, not only do I want the new ones, but the Thibodeau and Guptill one also in front of us when we talked about tonight.
Guptill, what would you give them, what we had?
Yeah.
You just want to see the copies, on that one.
Nothing new to me.
Nothing's new, that was a design and it closed, right?
Right, but now there has been a sidewalk, so there's more to talk
Oh, okay.
about. So it would be nice to have the picture in front of us.
All right.
And the same thing with Thibodeau.
Okay.
Thank you for your time.
And I also, yeah, and one more thing on the Guptill, you wanted me to meet with the developer.
Mhm.
And Mike, you may not have seen your email, and I said it'd be nice we'd love to have the developer come and meet with the conservation.
Out
Commission.
there, so. I'll
Yeah,
see.
yeah, if we can do that, that would be great. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Have a good night. Take care.
To give the board update, there was a master plan steering committee work session on Monday. It was a very good discussion on it, as to survey questions, which will be live in October. Originally, when I did the agenda, the date was to be determined. We're gonna try to have it live for the public, on the 18th of October. The town hall is anticipating doing an open house, hopefully not taking away from.
I think that's a great opportunity to do it.
So we feel like that was a good opportunity to have it then, and then in November, we're gonna be having a community meeting as well. Date hasn't been set yet, but it'll probably be the second week of November. And we're gonna meet again next week, and go over what we discussed.
Other business coming before the board? You want to talk to?
Yeah, sorry, I have a lot. Just wanted to let you know, I know I had emailed out to board, but in case paper copy, I like to have paper copies, but changes to planning went, zoning laws and. Department handout for reference for the board. Also wanted to piggyback off of, I sent out, I believe it was today or yesterday, got a training up today. The training opportunity with NHMA. I do realize it's on a weekend and it's all virtual. I was trying to just maybe do it in a space together, but when I reached out, they said they wanted each individual person to sign up. Which I guess they could do like if it's not. If you're interested and have time for it, just let me know. I know Donna said that she's signing up. We can reimburse the cost for that. It's just your time.
Oh, they don't reimburse it, they put finance in it.
Well,
Yeah.
like, well, don't pay for it, we'll pay for it. So I meant that, well, there's, opportunities for us to pay for it, so yeah, you're right, not reimbursable, but.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
You should probably give them.
Like
an
ask me
email.
back, and then there, in the email that I sent out, there's an email on it.
Right, finance,
Yeah.
finance Barrington.
Yeah, and they'll let me know, the finance ladies are both out today, but they let me know when they get them.
Okay.
The next item is, Invest NH Municipal Planning and Zoning Grant Program. I've been working with Second Regional, Planning Commission a little bit on this. The first thing, we're kind of discussing, we just discuss a little bit more about it, not necessarily a letter of support if the board doesn't want to go that direction. But for the first item, it's an Invest NH Community Housing Navigator Grant Program. And what this would be a position, administrative grant program. I sent like some informational things. I don't know if everybody had read through it or not. It's kind of a lot of information, but basically it would be someone to come in once a week. We share them with other towns or cities in the area. Right now, Farmington is the only other person of interest that we would partner with, but the Second Regional would be writing that grant, and that person would come to us once a week to work on housing initiatives. A lot of it's more like regulatory things, like for zoning changes or subdivision regulations, site plan regulations, that sort of thing, along with a lot of community outreach. I think it would be a positive thing. This is things that maybe I don't have time to work on, to have an extra person. But it's up to the board to make that decision. And if you have any questions or want to talk through it, I know that they're trying to apply for the grant soon, so a letter of support tonight or on the next planning board agenda if the board feels that the direction they want to go.
I'm thinking of make the next planning board agenda because they're looking to have the completed applications have to be submitted no later than September 30th, and the also made by October 14th.
So letter of support tonight. If you want to go through it. I apologize. I'm thinking of the next grant is not until October 30th.
I mean, my general,
Open discussion.
yes, it's like, I read through it and I've struggled to find like, even the clarity of what it does or what you get out of it.
Yeah, and I've asked questions about that too, like, what more, can you provide more detailed information on what this person would do? And, I haven't gotten enough resource, I feel like, to justify a full-time position, or at least for us, 1 day a week
Yeah.
for the next 2 years to work on something.
So they would be, this would be a grant funded position,
Yes.
right? Barrington would not be responsible for
And
anything.
the only responsibility that Barrington would have is to give that person access to files if needed. So they may have their own email address, that's gonna be set up, that may be the only cost, but their salary, their benefits, their computer. We just give them a space, but that's all funded through SRPC.
That's my concern is, the program background. They're talking about diverse housing types, to people of all ages, including starter homes, apartments and stuff like. It sounds like this is kind of a workforce housing related program. And my concern is the more affordable housing was put in here in Barrington, and really not been well received by the residents of the town. The row houses, high density stuff we put in, generally the feedback is negative. And I realize there's a push to do with it, but town residents just don't seem to like it. So I'm struggling with, we should invest in a program that is focused on doing the type of housing that the town generally seems not to want.
And it's going to encourage you to bring back your old zoning that you just changed last year.
Yeah, so.
Right.
I mean, 3 persons good, but if they're working toward a goal that the town really is not aligned with what the town really wants.
So I'll point out, it's not really free because all the, like, it's through Stratford Regional and we pay for Stratford Regional in your tax rate every year. So it might be grant money that's getting in there, but the whole purpose of most of these programs is you get somebody in and then once they're in the door, now they become a permanent fixture that you just absorb in onto your payroll after it. And it just carries on like it's big. I can't see anybody in the world, especially based on the fact that when you look at the qualifications they're looking for, it's a higher ed qualified person taking a position that's only going to be funded for potentially 2 years and that's all they're going to have. That just doesn't make any logical sense unless you see what the kind of hidden agenda is behind the layout.
Unless it's somebody new to the field and it's good experience for 2 years and move on.
My take was exactly what Ron said.
So, the next one is the HOP grant program. It's from a similar pot of money, but this goes toward more of, the purpose of the grant that we look at the need and analysis planning. We were planning to update our housing master plan chapter in the future. It hasn't been updated quite some time. And through this grant opportunity, the town would be applying for the grant. And anticipate using Stratford Regional Planning Council like done for other master plans for needs and analysis to they review the master plan sections and drafting it to update the development. So I wanted to bring this before you because we intend to apply for it since they're not waiting. We don't have town funds to have to pay for that chapter unless there's opposition for applying for that.
Say that again. No, I'm not, because I read through all this and I'm like,
So if you want to look at if you want to look through page 2 of 10 of the HOP grant one, it's the purpose of grants and needs analysis planning. That's what we would apply for. And this is more bullet point under Well, to review existing master plan, identify sections relating impact housing development, drafting revisions, master plan sections. Apply and community engagement to support the development and adoption of revisions. We have our revisions up for, we're trying to get on the cycle now for every year to readdress one of our chapters, 1 or 2, depending on the funding situation. Like now we're doing 2 because we can use DOT money to help fund that. Because it needs to be updated every now and then. So we have several chapters every 5 years, 6 years, one would be updated. And right now we're getting new census data next year or 2, so that every time we look at our housing chapter. For that.
Or is this sounds similar to the other one.
That's,
Similar because it's from the same pot of money, but it's instead of SRPC applying for it, the town's applying for it. So I would be applying for it.
so are we hiring somebody?
The thing I'm focused on though. is-
I'm already hired, so.
But the
I
purpose.
mean, we would end up hiring a consultant to do the master plan chapter. Is that what your question is?
The funds would come
Yes.
in and we'll spend it, the Stratford regional planning to do it.
As our consultant, because we would use a consultant anyways to update our master plan.
But the master plan section for the purpose of supporting increased housing supply, is that the only focus? I mean, they're gonna do anything we really want, or is it just gonna be?
We talked with, Jen, who put together like a rough estimate for me. She told me it would be a more robust master plan chapter. I can definitely get clarification from her on that. If they're just looking at this, you know, we want to look more than just these items, like, you know,
Yeah, if the only goal is to increase housing supply. I mean, I just.
right,
say
then
what I
that would
said
be
before.
no, but yeah,
You know, I mean, I'm neutral on it, but the town doesn't seem to,
yeah.
we don't seem to do what the town wants.
The housing supply is coming pretty steady in Barrington already.
Yeah, 257 dwelling units in the pipeline.
I'm in the field.
Yeah,
I know
It's
you,
been a steady increase of housing. in Barrington.
now, whether they can sell them or not, since housing starts at down 12.5%.
Believe it or not, they're not only stuff they're selling, and they're selling for like so much money, I can't fathom where the money's coming from.
So housing starts are down, but if you look at where that's focused, it's predominantly in the south and the west. The impact has not hit the northeast yet.
Yeah.
They're, from everything I'm reading, we're about 10 to 12 months out on that cycle.
What I'm seeing on the real estate online stuff is people have started dropping the price a little bit. We've seen that.
Yeah.
And 6 months ago, the house was under a contingency within 3 days.
Yeah.
And I'm not seeing that anymore. It's
No.
taking a little longer.
A house that was selling a year and a half ago for 300,000 is now selling for 6.
I know.
So to say that the cost hasn't gone up, I'm not sure where you're getting those numbers from, because they're not in Barrington, because of what, that's, I mean, the cost of housing.
Well, a lot of
is
them,
double.
these are mostly resales and
Oh,
if you look at the Barrington
construction.
resale sites, some of them are not class A housing, you know? So that's what the prices are probably dropping.
I mean, look at the housing, starts, I mean, John, you've spoken of that. The number of units being added to Barrington over the past 5 years is way, way above the past trend. So the housing supply in Barrington has increased dramatically. Maybe the demand is more than keeping pace, but certainly the housing starts, the housing supply has increased in
Yeah,
Barrington.
the COVID thing, because of people wanting to get out of the biggest city, Barrington was considered, let's go to a nice Barrington in the country, it's rural. We can do our work from home now. We don't have to be around a whole bunch of people. We're close to the lakes, we're close to the ocean, we're close to the mountains. Barrington's a great place. I want to move to Barrington.
Well, and the
And you got
tax
good-
rate is lower than all of your surrounding communities.
And you got your choices of high schools so that you can keep your kids educated. When people do their research, people say, I want to come to Barrington and I'll pay $100,000 more than that house sold for last year because I want to come to Barrington. That's what's happening right now.
Well,
But the trend was up even before the pandemic.
But it's the pandemic
Yeah, maybe.
made it so.
I don't know if the housing starts increasing, but the prices increased for certain, that's for sure.
Housing starts having to slow down a bit.
I think that if you look at the past 5 years compared to the before that, housing supply has increased in Barrington dramatically. Prices have gone up even more than the housing supply, so you can say maybe more houses. But I think, you know, the more affordable housing we put in, like I say, it's not well received by the residents.
It looks out of place in our community. Correct.
Yeah, is it just the design of that?
Well, let's
It's-
say
it's the
the
style.
rentals going.
We're not a townhouse.
School. I mean,
Yeah.
it's still-
But where it was placed, so close to the road and not back where it's not so visible.
When you look at how they're building out density here, it does not align with the rural nature of Barrington.
Well,
But that zoning change you guys made last year, that building that just went up, the ones across from the middle school, you wouldn't get all the units in there now. You're not gonna get all that you're gonna get behind urban because that was pre-approved. So now if they come in, you'll get 1/4 of that many on that same size property because of how that zoning change went through.
But the other thing too, Joyce, is, you know, with conservation, they put the houses in the front and the conservation in the back. So, you know, conservation subdivisions, that's what they look like. It's cheapest to put you know, you want a long road. You want the road as short as possible because the roads are expensive.
Mhm.
So they go in the front and the conservation goes in the back.
Right, well, but does the planning board have any ability to say you gotta put those houses back
Those
then?
aren't conservation subdivision. That was approved as a condo, as a multifamily development.
Right. I
That's
mean,
why they're right up front.
Yeah,
They have a right to
pushed
fill that
back.
whole lot up because of that 10,000 for each unit.
Right.
They could fill the whole lot up. Now it's 40,000 for each unit. Now they won't fill the whole lot up. That was the
It's a
whole
good
concept.
zoning
of when
change.
So they
people-
were approved for another 20 units too, right?
Well,
They
that
got
phase
20
two, they've
built.
started part of phase two, but it's.
Oh, they have started.
It's going in that other road. of
Yeah, the
property
road,
that-
yeah,
But
right.
they've already started some
Oh,
of that.
wow.
But this is where, like, you almost have to get your crystal ball out and say, okay, if we approve this, what does it look like? What does it allow people to do long term?
Mhm.
And I can tell you, 6 years ago, when I first got on this board, Marcia and I had a tussle and a go around on it where I was like, why would we ever want this kind of density? She was like, it'll never happen. Well, 6 years later, here we are sitting here having a conversation over it, or 7 years later now, having a conversation about it. And that is what happens. You have to be able to say, okay, what does that do to what we want our community to be?
I think you're right. Most people want market rate housing. They don't want any.
Well,
Right.
In Barrington, because of what Barrington is.
Yeah.
If you wanted to see some conservation subdivisions and how they look, I can show you what some of them look like compared to conventional ones.
Well, I think about it, like, if you want to do stuff like this, it's weird to almost to a more dense style unit. You almost want individual condo style units, much like the one we're going to look at tomorrow, where their setup is individual and they have shared septics. So everything runs back to one system.
Or another one like Yearling, where they had that little cluster group.
Yeah,
There was no lot lines, that cluster group, but they got their own individual well and septic, but they're kind of grouped all along that road a little bit. And you can do
So
that,
tight.
yeah, but you can do that as part of a conservation subdivision. You don't have to do lot lines like they are all back or like they did in Village Place. You can do them as little cluster groups, and that's allowed by our regulations too already.
Because it does seem you want Barrington to be a place that a young family can afford to come.
Well, that's gonna, I'll tell you, you can drive for that, but that will never happen in a natural environment. You end up in a forced situation where that will happen, because you will always price out a young family. If you look at, I mean, and these developments are a perfect example that are going in here. You're talking rentals that are, what, $2,500 a month? I don't know many young families that can come in and swing $2,500 a month unless they all have decent jobs.
I think for ownership, it's gonna be the condos will be the entry level house for most people.
Right.
Like about 380,000 probably to start.
And that's
And you're renting an apartment while you're buying
It's
it.
essentially a
Yeah,
buying
it's the
one, yeah.
apartment.
And then think about that from an affordability, or what level of
Look at the
affordability are
appreciation.
you talking about?
Yeah.
I mean, 380 grand, I know, like 6 years ago.
Well,
when
the
I
other
had
option is
my house there,
750 up here.
On that funding money they just came out with, where you can get millions of dollars by having the thing shovel ready and have it built in 18 months.
Yeah.
You have to guarantee that lower rate for 5 years. So in 5 years, you can rent them out for 5 years at that market value.
Right.
When that's all done, you get to keep all those millions of dollars, and now you can sell it for market price. And that's what's gonna happen. So all they did was they threw a Band-Aid at a great big blister that's gonna fall off. before the blister pops. I mean, we're gonna be in worse shape. That ain't gonna fix the thing.
That's why when we talk about if you market rate or when you talk about younger families, you're building more to a young family that's coming in that might be 2-bedroom. And so you're gearing toward two populations, your young population, your old population. But then it becomes an affordability model. Because you've got to be able to build it in a way that is affordable yet fits with the rural character that we talk about in Barrington.
And the builder's gotta make a profit. He's not gonna do it
Right,
because.
he's not gonna do it for nothing. Which is why when you look at like these developments that are coming in, they're all targeting 3-bedroom because they're targeting the higher end family model. And even almost empty nester, your high school kids these are people who are making $200,000+
And if you look at
household.
the cost of buying the property, the cost of getting approvals, even the stuff of hiring all the surveyors, the engineers, these wetland delineators, going through the whole thing. The stuff, so we want to protect some more stuff, so now we're gonna make them pay this other cost, then you got the cost of the road, all of that gets compounded out. That, when they start selling them lots, it sounds like they're making a fortune, but they're not, because they're just trying to get their money back.
Right.
Till they're halfway through before they get any money at all coming back in their own pockets.
Right, there's a break-even point, and then your profit point comes after that, and
And the more you keep pushing cost up at that first starter level, that's pushing the cost of that onto the other side too. You know, it's a vicious cycle is what it is.
and that's actually what pushes them to the higher end housing.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
that's why you see the market starts at 600,000+ right up the road right here.
It sounds like a good leeway to his impact fees.
To Vanessa's point, we can discuss a lot of this stuff all night, but let's move forward. so we get out of it.
Totally.
I agree with that.
So the first one is to vote on the impact fee collection ending effective October 1st, 2022. Back before you in August, September, recommendation of select board.
What's the impact on taxes? The impact thing goes away. Is there any impact on taxes?
I don't believe there will be, because right now the impact fee goes to the school and it was helped to pay off the bond that was in place. The bond's going away. That's the reason why the impact fee has to go away, because you can't collect money to pay a bill that's already paid. Right.
But if the impact thing goes away, it seems to me the tax should go down in some ways.
No, the impact fee was to help to pay that school bond. The school bond would be paid off. So the money coming in.
The school budget should come down.
The school budget could down about 800,000, but it's not going.
I was gonna say,
But-
your
but-
legislation.
But part of that school budget didn't go up as much as it would have, because the impact fee helped cover that cost, so they weren't eating it all out of their school budget. You know.
So that's where the
The
taxpayers save
impact fee
time,
was to help
save
keep
money
that-
on the last
Well,
20 years. This
theoretically,
has been
yes.
like-
The problem with that is they don't have to use the school impact fee in any one year. And they don't have to use it to buy down the tax rate. They can use it for other costs associated with running the school. So
It
that,
doesn't have to go to bond payoff.
Technically, no, it pays for the bond. And there's enough, and what came in, the bond was high enough that the school, the impact fee didn't cover their bond.
right,
So because they put in their budget to pay the bond and they used that money for other things, might have been what happened. But technically, the bond was paying that. It's just on how you want to say the money was awarded.
Right,
Right, for
The
accounting.
shell game.
Yeah,
it
but
absolutely is.
but the money had to go, if the bond was less than what the impact fee was, you couldn't collect that impact fee.
Got it.
Which wasn't the case. In our case, the bond was greater than the impact. fee.
Right, so they had to keep collecting.
So they kept paying that, and then they kept using the impact fee for other items.
But they could have said, we're not gonna budget enough for that school bond and we're gonna use the impact fee. It's just like,
Right.
it's
just an
it's
accounting
one
thing,
after
right?
the other, that's the way you shift money around.
And like a couple of years ago, they only used, there was what, like $300 and 300,000 in the impact fee line, and
They were like, oh, we didn't even know we had that there.
right. And then they ended up using it, but if you look at, they're making what, an $800,000 of, what was it, 800 grand a year payment in
Yeah.
the school, so like you're only covering 30,
Right,
roughly
yeah.
40% of that impact fee.
Well, that's all you were supposed to cover. See, what it is the impact fee was designed that the school was built for the town's use. and the town has to cover that out of its own costs and its own coffers. The additional, they made the building bigger than they needed at the time for the anticipated growth. So that impact fee was for that anticipated growth that the town did over and above what its need was. So only a portion of that bond was to be covered by the impact fee. It wasn't supposed to be the whole thing anyways. And actually, by the way it worked out, the population increase in that school never increased. So therefore, we didn't have to build the school as big as we did, but we still had the bond money to cover it because we did build it bigger.
Well, at the end of the day, it sounds like the impact fee should go away, and I think that should be a recommendation. So.
Well,
that-
technically, you
what-
can't collect it
I'm
anymore
confused.
anyways after-
But I
Isn't
thought we
that what
already
you said
did
at the
that.
last meeting?
Yeah, so
And then
Why are we
the
not-
select board voted on it.
there's direction by our legal attorneys that you hear it first at the planning board to make a recommendation to the select board. And the select board makes a recommendation back to the planning board. back to- I understand, I'm just going with.
Glad you don't follow that.
So we're just here to vote.
To
This
officially
just
vote.
needs to be voted on.
Yeah.
Again,
But why? Because the planning board or select board never have any say over the collection of the use of that money.
Impact fees are created and set up by the planning board and they're discontinued by the planning board by state statute. That's why.
Oh. man.
So then how does the select
So
board
let's
get
follow the
involved?
statute.
I have no clue why the select board was involved. That was the town's attorney's thing. And I have no clue why. I couldn't figure out why, but we figured, okay, we'll just go through the process to make sure we're
I
covered.
think the end of the day, we should just vote again and get, and.
Correct.
Come on.
Or we can go home.
No,
We can argue about.
Yeah,
We should do it, but let's do it this way and get done.
So are you looking for a motion to discontinue the impact fee?
I'll make a motion just to continue the impact fee.
And what was the date on it? You gotta put the date first.
October 1st, 22.
who was the second one?
Just to get this.
Just pick one.
Oh, did you
I know.
give the Andy?
Masucci, aye.
Capello, I.
Andy, am I? Tessie, your eye.
Just go ahead.
Howard, aye.
This is the third time I voted on this.
Which may lead into the second part of this. We have 253 housing units being built in town. Like, do we have a projected idea what the impact is going to be to our school system there? And is it gonna force us into a situation where our elementary or middle school needs to?
Well, I can tell you elementary already needs to be.
I know, I mean, there's 100 more kids in kindergarten.
Yeah,
in
when I
first
talked
grade.
to the school board clerk, CIP, for example, she gave me some projects too, but she said it wasn't necessarily middle school, like you said, the elementary school, that's the last thing I'm saying.
Right.
High school is what they expect is still what it is, like it hasn't really shown
No,
increase
that
that the
hasn't
younger
changed much.
children has.
Overall population, 2011 to 22 has not changed, 1,423 kids, 1,454.
Right.
But it jumps around a lot. And you get 20, 30 extra kids in one grade and then they'll graduate and then it flattens out.
That's what I was gonna say. It's about a 35 kid cycle is what
Yeah.
I've seen as I followed the trend
Right.
on it.
Yeah.
But we are seeing increased numbers now at the elementary school level, which is going
Then
to
it's
start
beginning
carrying
Up through middle and high school.
So.
Yeah.
Is all this new housing's coming, there is an impact tied to this. And I'm assuming the impact fee for the units that are already being developed are included in that, or do they not?
Time
come
to CO,
until-
time to CO. If they get a CO on October 1st, they pay it. If it's after October 1st, they don't.
So we're gonna see 300 housing starts that don't get any
But
impact.
this is also an opportunity to do a new study to see what our needs are. I know public safety has come to
Yeah.
me as
Public
well and
safety
asked,
makes
would it be
Public
appropriate for
safety,
me to
highway.
ask something to look into, and it's like absolutely bring to the board about.
Money and has one for recreation based on a 50-year look.
And,
50
and I
50
did see
years.
that there's
A recreation.
another town does a,
And
yeah,
one
it's
for
like
the
a
fire
recreation one. I asked the recreation department, I don't know if she's ready to commit to
Oh.
doing an impact fee.
I would
But-
rather commit to a project and come up with a cost, and the town has to have this proportional share.
Yeah.
And you can charge an impact fee for the proportion of the new impact. And so there's a whole, it's not just, okay, we want an extra 100 grand, so we're gonna raise an impact fee. You have to hire this person in, they gotta do this whole analysis. It's a big deal to create an impact fee.
We're not
Yeah.
giving all that money back again.
But, I
That
mean,
was
I
the-
feel it seems like a need.
We had to get money back in the past because.
Really?
For the road impact fee.
Offsite improvements is what it was.
The guy who wrote the check.
How much did we give back?
We gave back all but 7,000 of the 209.
So can you do for maintenance things too, like?
No,
Some
cannot be maintenance, it has to be capital
Capital,
improvements.
so fire engines, you could do it.
It has to be a capital improvement, so
Your
if you're
transfer
fire,
station needs to be up, is gonna
Well,
be, it
the
needs a major
safety
upgrade.
building.
it has to be capital improvement investment, and it has to be not what the town needs today, it's what the town builds for their
Right,
future
right.
because of the future growth. So what you need today, you gotta pay out of your own pockets, and then the additional that you build extra, you can charge an impact fee for.
So can we get an impact fee before the police submit
No,
their
they gotta put
proposal?
the package together, you gotta come up with a cost, you gotta figure, and then that guy you hire has to look at what the town's proportional share would be, how much the additional.
Well, still, they were talking about building this, what, 30 years ahead?
Right.
Well, that's so-
So, but I'm questioning the timeline, since that's gonna
No,
become
they-
before the
project can be
voters.
started now, and this is 100% right, you wanna start it now, you wanna start looking at it, and to get your ducks
Get a
on.
cost estimate, like I've asked for it in our budget for next.
Well, if you're out 30 years, you're probably talking about another fire station too. It's,
It's possible.
yeah, like in the, kind of separate them so they, you know, the response times,
Yeah.
yeah. it's better.
I wanna be here on that
Up on
tax.
Route 9 somewhere. so we-
Could be.
you know,
Response time. Probably gonna need a bigger truck to handle the crack barrel, what's going in.
Here's the dilemma. You gotta understand.
I'm still waiting.
And that's the reason why that other money had to go back. If you
If
put this all in place
Right.
and you don't build it, you gotta give all that money back, you gotta give their interest back and everything else, and then you got all your staff, all the other investments you did. You gotta produce the project. If you're not gonna produce the project, don't bother taking that impact fee thing.
Mhm.
You gotta-
Chief Joy told me,
Yeah.
I will build it.
Yeah.
But the town has to
But you
vote
know,
to spend
The
their funds
voters
a little
will,
bit too.
will
So
probably
it's not
support
just-
police.
And there's a-
If they can get it-
emergency.
Moving police
The
and
one
fire,
thing
he
about
does have-
living in a firehouse, they don't want
Any building,
To
I
what?
don't think went through it first time, did it?
it.
No,
Well, they have been for the new one, they ended up doing upgrades to both.
I don't think we
The
have.
fire and the police both did some
Oh,
upgrades.
well, I guess we have a few.
Yeah, you've got.
But we got primarily paid.
Well, nothing passes the first time.
The middle school.
It's not very many.
Middle school probably
And
had
they run
six
it
votes
on
for
impulse,
that.
which is your best.
Planes, they've read the drain in the lake back in 1980.
Publication tool.
To pay for the dam.
So you're not gonna build a new station out
Yeah,
wherever.
people who wells were
Not
drowned.
put that company in it.
You mean them Doug wells for Dr. Lake?
Some of them.
Yeah, because
It's like they were talking,
It's all based on water table.
Yeah.
2 meetings ago, or last meeting.
so
Does it sound like coming to the board that I
The fire
should
engine.
try to get a
I
proposal
think
or?
I'll make a motion to, have Vanessa seek out a scope of work and request a proposal for,
That was.
analysis of an
No, Rick
impact
was
fee,
well aware. It was
a new impact fee.
In relation to the public safety?
In relation, I would,
School, because there's separate
Right.
one,
High school, I think.
it's,
so it'd be
yeah,
two different ones probably, but
yeah, one for school, and I mean, it's more than public safety though, like I think about,
Well, you said the transfer station too.
well, that transfer
Just have a
station.
look into possibilities of any impact fees that the town might be interested in.
Oh,
That way
okay.
you cover-
Right, because I just feel like the rec,
I'll go
that
with
building with the
John's
rec department.
very open and free wording here.
Because each one can come up with something, and one might come forward, the other one
Whatever
might
their
say, no, we're not
down,
gonna go.
whatever their tank, was, they couldn't tell me exactly what their tank was.
Roll call vote.
Masucci, aye.
Really?
Capiello, I,
Andy, am I?
That's your, this one.
it was in
Yeah, fine.
January. And actually, they
Okay.
got oil, but
Uh,
the director had been-
any other
He says-
items? There we go. I was like, I know I have more stuff here. Okay,
Okay, motion to adjourn.
rules of procedure. What did I do with that?
I know that I did get comments from John, I have not added them in yet, so I did still his, John this whole copy. But, other things to that I would like to bring up at least first, and the board can talk about if there's any other changes you want to discuss. I know that we had talked previously about the term or time limit or, like controlling length of types of scheduling. I don't know if the board wants to consider not going past a certain time, or to look at the agenda, because we don't always know what we're gonna get with our agenda, wherever people commit. Get larger, larger. Oh yeah, October 4th is getting pretty lengthy there. But, so I don't know if that's something that the board want to consider. I know the ZBA have put that in their rules of procedure recently.
So are they stopping at a certain time?
They are, so if they're not done by 2:30, they table it to their next regular scheduled meeting.
But don't they have to continue in case it's left there before they?
Yeah, I mean, they're.
And you do have the option.
Out, but,
And you do have the option at that meeting, if you think you can be done in another 10 or 15 minutes, you can go ahead and finish. You guys can vote to do that.
yeah.
You know, if you needed to, if you felt that it was appropriate.
I mean, for me, I would not be in favor of that. I mean, people show up, they bring engineers, they're paying for it.
That's,
I think
Yeah,
the least we
I
can do
agree.
is sit here.
I hate to send somebody away.
I mean, I hate going to 11:05 or so, but, I mean.
It's, I mean, we don't know like what our agenda is, it could be like,
about that?
yeah.
July of that.
The less-
One meeting, it goes long, and you're gonna give me grief?
Yeah, because you weren't here for it.
He wasn't here. One meeting.
But on that note, which is a great point, I just wanted to ask about procedure for public hearings, about maybe more limiting them being like the applicant or the presentation by the person to be limited to a time frame instead of, I don't know if we want to put a time limit on how long a person can speak. For example, there's one that I'm looking at from, I know this is from Portsmouth, but they have a like presentation, questions by the planning board members, public comment, 2 or 4 against application. And all comments should be directed to the chair. First round, maximum 3 minutes per person. Oral comments only. Second round, maximum 10 minutes per person. Third round, maximum 10%. Chair closes the public hearing, motion application. No further prompt, like that sort of roll call, or if you want to term, like limits on an application. Sort of preliminary
I would
concepts, I
want
don't
a
know.
limitation on public comment.
Oh, public comment, yeah. But the presentation. I
Each
think-
person should be limited to, I mean, generally, once, some people get up there and just keep saying the same thing over and over again, right?
Yeah,
And, you know, no one knows the property like I know the property, I hiked it since I was a kid, you know, that's.
I know in other municipalities, not necessarily New Hampshire, but I've worked where they had like a timer or something, like, okay, your 3 minutes is up. I mean, that's what that. city
I
has
think for public
limits,
comment, we should limit it per person to
3 minutes.
3 minutes, 5 minutes, something,
Yeah.
you know, ding, you're done.
You've done it many times in the past, it just wasn't written in your rules.
Right. We should enforce it. If we want to stay listening, all that, we're gonna stop. But I mean, the presentations, I think, I can't remember a presentation I thought was too long, and generally our questions, and I think it'll, the part that make it go long. Right, sometimes we get around and ask a little about stuff that we maybe we shouldn't be, and.
that's for sure.
And we need to run you guys more.
Yeah, I mean, I felt when we were discussing, let's say, the daycare, we could have done, we all knew she had to follow certain regulations from the town and the state. I felt like that could have been a really efficient conversation. Yes, get, the town people out, follow their recommendations, get the state out, follow their recommendations. And
I
we'll
think-
be
I
done.
think when we go, there are a lot of things that we don't have purview over. State highways, things like that, schooling is regulated by the bodies. I think we tend to get into those things even though we have no authority to say anything. So I think that, but it is what it is. We do what we do.
And as a volunteer board, sometimes you want to understand the project, so you know the decision you're making is the right decision. And sometimes you have to ask questions, things go a little longer, because like you said, it's not your expertise, but you want to make sure that you're making an informed decision. And I can see where sometimes that would take longer. And sometimes you get, like you said, conversations outside of your role. But does the answer to them help you perform your role? So it's, I can see where you could look at it either way, being correct.
I think we do it, but I think we're gonna continue to do it. It's just the nature of the beast.
When somebody comes in for a discussion, I think we should have some kind of form to say, what are you coming in for, not what do you want me to do?
Right.
Oh, yeah.
What do you want me to
They
do?
should be, they should
They
be
should be
saying,
They
making a
need to
proposal.
tell you what they're going to do. I think they should be like, 5 questions or something. Because it's not up to you guys to tell them much. to do, they'd tell you what they wanted to.
Yeah, I think if we tell them what to do, and then we don't approve it later on,
Right, then they're like,
it
what
goes
was,
back.
what you
It's
said?
back.
Told us to
It's
do
bad.
this.
We were told to, but we didn't have all the information, you know. We didn't have any
So the
response.
preliminary is non-binding.
And-
Yeah.
So-
Yeah,
But still,
right.
when if you come on, we get the input, like they do that input, but then we don't approve it. They're not happy, and they have reason not to be happy.
My question was how many times we give input. So the development that we're going to do the site walk on tomorrow. So they've been here twice. And now
One was
this,
the Conception.
right, so one was the conceptual. So why were they coming before us a second time without the site walk and without the Conservation Commission
Well, the
report?
application they make to this board,
You might not need a
it's
sign.
not, the vast majority of the applications that come in front of this board do not go to sidewalk.
Mhm.
They make their application, people look at the plans, they
We're gonna
have.
send them out to all the department heads, the Conservation Commission asks for a sidewalk. And the
Okay,
planning board doesn't necessarily have to
I would have wanted one on that one.
agree to.
like,
do that.
yeah, I wasn't
But
sure we accomplished anything on that second
it's
time they
supposed-
came forward.
So the purpose of a sidewalk is supposed to clarify extra.
Well,
questions.
that I can see.
Well,
Yeah.
That's what their intent is. I don't know if that was actually.
Well,
But that was a
Yeah.
long
The
discussion.
woman at the end who was worried about impacts on like lights and so forth.
Yeah,
So the second time he come in was his base application. He has to come in and make that application to open his hearing. His hearing doesn't start until he makes that application. That first thing was, he come in for a discussion, here's what I want to do. Do you guys see any issues with this? I want to make sure that I address my plans correctly when I come in. So the first, that when he came in last time, that was his application. That's like technically the first time that he was in here with an application. We can't do a sidewalk until he makes the application, you accept the application, because that sidewalk is actually a continuation of that.
Yeah, I'm struggling because I don't think any meeting needs to go on from 6:30 at night to over 11. Yeah, I just think there's inefficiency there. So how can we
Well,
improve
the
that?
last meeting, there was a lot going on. Plus you had the guy with the containers at the end.
That, wow.
Yeah.
The
but
daycare and the
daycare's
containers took a lot.
too long.
They
The
both
what?
had way more conversations than we needed, both of those.
Yeah.
I think Thibodeau's was pretty much straightforward because here's my application, you guys have a look at it. A lot of it was the discussion of the separation of the buildings, that roof line thing that he made a little change on. And then the
The
rest of it
road.
was, well, the driveway coming in, how it's gonna be situated. And then he needs that 9.6 to make the corner, which you do on the sidewalk on. But because he came in with that application, that also opened it up to where now you get your third party review with CMA about his drainage and all the other stuff. So that's all happening in the background now for when he comes back. But none of that could have been started without him coming in with the application.
But the sidewalks are helpful too. I remember last week we had that thing off of Route 4 there, remember that?
Yeah, Meadowbrook.
We had a butters that, you know, oh, this is terrible, I'm gonna be able to see it, and then when we got out there, it was nowhere near as bad as the abutter was making out to be.
Mhm.
So, but if we're going out there, you know.
Yeah, I can see we're seeing, yeah, I was just trying to figure out why we had to spend so much time on 2 meetings and now it'll be a 3rd meeting. That's a lot of discussion time.
Well, the discussion was just a discussion and it gets closed, he kind of starts all over.
Yeah.
Because none of that's binding.
And most people don't come in for that discussion to begin with, but it's been encouraged to make sure they understand what the board wants so they can remember the complete application. Because of some of these guys that have been on for a board here for a while, will tell you, we have some that go on for a year and a half because they come in, they don't have all the information. They come back with more, then they come back with more. Then we got to extend it 3 months because we got to get that.
Can somebody preview that ahead of time and say you don't have all your ducks in a row, you can't come to planning
Because
board?
there's always issues. There's always
Conceptual to help the
issues. There's
process.
always things. Yeah, the planning board is required by state law, to not only the board, but in staff, is to assist the applicant on how to comply with the regulations. Your regulations can be so stringent and so confusing that even your normal engineering stuff, they'll come in, you sit down, you know what I mean?
Well, yeah, so
How many
I'm,
discussions I've
I'm,
had with the engineer on that project to explain to him the usage and why that usage could work. Because he kept saying that wouldn't work, he had to do something else. I go, no, you can't do that, that's illegal. I'm showing him in the zoning way it doesn't work, trying to explain to him what he can do. This is all happening behind the scenes before they even come here.
right. I guess I just thought all of that would happen behind the
Well, it
scenes.
is, and he's got a complete application now of stuff that meets the zoning in the site review regulations, other than he needs relief on that 9.6. But then we want the third party engineers so they can look at it to make sure like all the drainage works and all the other stuff.
And that's when staff takes it, like, reviews it all, so when he comes back, he should either be A, continuing or B, looking for.
I think we started talking with Paul on this project like, what, 6 months ago or 7 months ago? That's how much we've been involved with it before it even came to you.
Now, the original plan he applied for had two large buildings, remember?
Well, he was showing that because,
Conservation Commission saw that.
right,
That's what
so
happened.
That's conceptual.
and that was,
Yeah, I know.
and that was the concept of having that mixed use by having the stuff on the second story. And he was like, that would look really bad in that lot because of the way the lot topoed and stuff going up through. So he said, I think it would look better this way. And I was like, well, bring it to the board, get their opinion so that you can bring forward a plan that you would like, that you think they would approve. Because what if he would have came to you without showing those big buildings and said, I want to put the small ones, and you guys say, well, maybe the big ones would be better, because really that beats what a mixed use structure is. So, you know, that's the reason why you got so many different meetings with it, because it's not straight up black and white, the way everything's all written and how stuff gets approved.
Right, and I think what that kind of affirmed is that one large building is not necessarily the answer for Barrington.
No.
For the look that you're trying to accomplish here.
Yeah, because if you look at like Yearling, they got all those separate individual units, that looks a lot better than across from the middle school, but technically it's the same type of concept where they still get the same number of dwelling units.
All right, so what I'm hearing, we have to do all this, it's reining in everyone's discussion is the only way we can shorten these meetings.
Ding, ding, ding. Ding, ding, ding.
3 minutes.
Okay,
Well,
all right.
well, we can
Something
spirit,
makes it better, right?
You're all with me in spirit.
hold on expectation.
The only real change I heard now is limits on public comment to 3 minutes per person to add in here. So I'll let you know as part of the update, part of the state, we have to do our fee schedule changes. Did you want to talk about something before we talk about fee schedule?
Yeah, with the public hearing piece, I hate to limit somebody who may be making a very valid point. Is there something that we can put in there that is a request for an extension if they have something actually meaningful?
A presentation that they,
Right,
plan
to
to do.
discuss or to present that it actually serves some value?
Well, I think if you limit their presentation to 3 minutes, but we can ask questions beyond the 3 minute period. I think.
Yeah, once we engage them in conversation,
That
we
will-
determine.
The presentation is 3 minutes. If we ask questions above the 3 minutes, that's okay.
Sometimes it takes 3 minutes just to get through the baseline information if you're trying to explain something, to give somebody the historical piece. Like, that's why I said, I feel like they may need
I
to
think
be
the
able to
abutters-
request.
I don't think I've heard of about it that to me could get done in 3 minutes.
Or maybe the
I'm talking about.
the abutter stuff could be limited to 3 minutes, but your presentation,
Oh,
I'm not
he
talking
has to have
about
enough
just
time.
the abutter.
He has to have enough time to make his presentation, so you understand what the application is. The
Public
comment.
comment is your abutters, then you may have somebody who has a like legit gripe. And it may take more than 3 minutes just to get through hey, here's why I'm really concerned on this and what the data is that supports it. Like, and I'll use for an
There is
example,
good stuff.
like, we're just trying to like fix our private road, and I can tell you the back and forth that I've had just on that with neighbors is like ready to throw up over the conversation.
But I don't want to hear that. See, I only want
But
the,
what it is like.
the summary of that.
Part of it is like, you have people who are providing compelling information, and I can tell you, I can show you emails that I put together that tie, like, and for example, we're using milling, so when you look at how it connects, like, milling's connecting through UNH and a grant program they had that ties to the like National Transportation Safety Bureau, and like, so there's this big connection that brings it all together, but you have to be able to explain it to people to do that.
Well, if they come in, we have that, do a bullet sheet for us. You're prepared. Come in prepared.
Yeah, if they
Not prepared,
submit
come in.
something that they want to talk to us, we
Come
can.
in ahead of time, get a small point you want to talk about, and then get done in 3 minutes.
I think it helps if people just don't go on and on or come back.
Yeah.
You've already had your 3 minutes.
I mean, to me,
Often
they go along,
they
they
make
keep
an
us
emotional
keep us saying
response to it.
Same thing over and over again.
Agreed, and you definitely don't want the emotional response, I just want to make sure that we're allocating the
They gotta
amount
cut
of
the
time
trees
to
down.
to present it.
Right, so 3 minutes, but telling people they have the option to submit accompanying documents.
Right, or requests that they submit, like, if you know you're gonna go long, please submit a prior accompanying.
No, don't go long, give us a
No.
little sheet so we can review it ahead of time,
Right,
and you can go quick. So. If you start giving exceptions, everyone's gonna want,
It's like
you don't get the exception.
When they submit letters, like we read the highlights of the letter.
right.
You let the guy before me talk for 15 minutes and you cut me off at 3?
Yeah,
Right.
right.
Yeah. But everybody.
You gotta be consistent.
We
Agreed.
don't even have to put them in there, it's just option.
Well, if they talk to you, they're gonna also say, do a full sheet. And they'll have time so they can review it. And still get done in 3 minutes. We ask questions, they might like go longer than that. It's only we ask questions.
Are there any other things you want to change in the rules of procedure or add? Just like, so looking at the fee schedule, right now our current fee schedule, the way it is, still has like recording sheets that we're not doing anymore, and our postage is going up, so we're proposing an $8 butter fee, increase of 7. We no longer charge for postings in the papers, since they're all done online and public places. There is a $25 state LCHEP fee for reporting. So we're proposing to increase to the $300 application fee. How much for 300? But that includes staff time and review process, recording a first page of the documents. Any additional pages would be extra. It's comparable to Lee is what they're the closest one I can find that's like our town. That's what they just changed their fee schedule for that. I don't know when the last fee schedule was changed. When I looked up, it turns out
It hasn't been.
ours was 2004 was from our fee page here, which is reflected here. But before then, we're not here to make money. That's not what this is about. This is to help with cost too. There's cost associated with, even though we're not putting it in the paper, there is cost to produce that. There's cost to, like John said, like I mean, he's in a different department, but he still meets with the people, like as part of our.
What was before this?
I'm sorry,
What was it before?
150.
150 is the double.
Well, so it was $75 for posting, 150 for hearing, $7 for butter, and $50 for recording the first sheet. Additional sheets are extra. So essentially, we were charging 200 plus the posting fee of 275.
Are you saying in that 300 is the 50?
Yes, which I know we don't charge that 50 anymore.
No,
But
but I'm
I'm
not talking about the paper, I'm talking about the first page of recording.
Yes, that would be a part of that. But there would be the $25 LCHIP.
Can I
would be
suggest
separate.
that be separate? Because when people come in,
That's fine, yeah.
I mean, they're gonna say, okay, I paid for the first page, we already know they did. But then if there's additional pages, they gotta pay us more money,
Mhm.
but I think it should be separate. That's how else we can keep track of that fee.
I think what Vanessa's proposing is just a flat fee at $300.
But if it's more than one page,
And that won't be included the LCHIP though.
the
No.
LCHIP would be a separate fee.
So really you're going from 150 to 250? Because that 50 was already included before?
Yeah.
So, so that $250, they're getting a steal, because if you look at how much staff time's involved to put an application package together for all your stuff before it comes in here, the time meeting with them, make sure the stuff's all done. Even if you charge them 300 plus that $50, the town's probably still losing money.
But you
Well, they're
also,
already paying $277.
but
it's
you also
technically
have
what
to
they're currently
include
paying.
$150 per lot in a subdivision.
It's on top.
Right, so that's, where the
That
numbers
would be
come in at.
additional, because
But I don't know if we want to increase that additional. So right now it's,
Guess the question is, the fees currently covering what you guys do? I mean, has anybody done a study? Or no, or
What is
No,
the, so what is the fee?
calculated in a book somewhere?
Because if it's not offsetting the costs
We're not here to make money, so.
No, but
Yeah.
you need to cover your costs.
So it's in general, it would say a few hours of our time. It actually takes more than that, but not all applications take.
But isn't that making money then? Isn't that coming back to what you're saying? Because the way I look at it is I would almost just say we're using it to defer a portion of the staff costs, the labor costs that you would otherwise have to pay a professional outside to help do for you. We're doing.
No matter what you do
Right.
on
I-
every
I
application.
You're gonna pay a lot more than.
Staff at this point.
So.
Say that
So I'm
again,
gonna break
Barbara.
it down to how I did the stuff in my department, so you guys can follow. On my building permit fees, what I ended up doing was I took the cost of running the department. I took the percentage of time that I spent working on just building, or all my staff working on just the building stuff. And I looked at how much money we collected in building permit fees. I ended up increasing our building permit fees because we were losing, we were going behind. So when I did the whole analysis and brought it through, we raised our fees, and then last year we come out, I think we ended up making like $1,000 more than what we needed to cover the cost, so we were ahead a little bit, but it wasn't ahead a lot, but the year before that, we were off a 2,000 more. This year, because of what's going on, not only because of the steady amount of work coming in, but because of ours is based on a cost per 1,000. And the construction costs going up, each permit went up naturally in price, and the rates that housing has gone up higher than the cost of running an apartment, because we didn't get raises that equal what those other costs were. So we're probably gonna be a little ahead this year too, but there's been years we're behind. And the way the state does it about doing it, about not making a profit, it's based on averages. And they know that you can't be perfect every year. There's gonna be some years you're a little ahead, there's some years you're gonna be a little behind. But if you stay within that range and you're right in there, it's considered not making a profit. So if you take the cost of running that whole planning department, and really all they're doing is the stuff coming in, I mean, half of it maybe comes in, that you're answering questions and doing stuff with the general public. They want to know what's going on, but the other half of that department cost has to do with applications to the planning board and the zoning board. And the planning board probably has got way more time consuming than the zoning board stuff is, when you look at the total amount of time you spend each month
John,
on those.
no, stop you there. You do the same amount of work as you do for a zoning application, as you do for a planning board one. Ask me, I do them.
I know, but you have way more planning board applications.
I don't
than you
know,
do
we
zoning
have
board.
4 right before the ZBA now, so,
Yeah, but then typically, there's more planning board.
but it's
applications
still
than
the
zoning.
same steps, no matter what board it is. You still have to do, I mean,
Right, they're getting up at
I have
9:30.
my, huh?
They're getting up at 9:30.
Yeah.
But I guess what I'm saying, the cost of running that department and all the costs, you have a right to recoup that cost, and that's not making a profit. So even
Right.
at these new rates, you're probably not getting back what the town is putting into it for cost.
Well, and that's kind of what I'm saying, is I feel like it's still a bit on the low end of what it.
I think so too. Some of this goes back quite a few
But
years.
if you double it, if you,
But you're not
I
doubling it. You're not, you're increasing. She's saying go to $300, which is an increase of $23 over the existing piece, 23. Because when you look at the total cost, it's $277. And she's saying 300 flat fee there, which is an increase of $23. That's not very much.
well, we give more money, we can pay you overtime, Joyce, when you can.
Double time? Out of zero?
Double of zero.
That's what it is.
So you're proposing $400.
Well,
If you
and
look
Joyce,
at proportionally, like with our,
Yeah.
like same with our
how
budget,
many times
it would
zero
be
is still zero.
probably even more, so we probably spend, I'd say, in your, like your staff work, when you're doing for applications, is probably at least half our time.
That's what I was saying.
So,
Mhm.
yeah, that'd be a lot higher, it would definitely be a higher cost,
Well, I mean,
but
if you just took like a rough ballpark of, let's say you've got, $150,000 in cost for the department.
I don't think
That's low.
anybody's ever done.
I'm trying
that'd be
to,
nice.
well, when you factor in benefits, it's actually. more
Oh,
than
yeah, that's true. Forget about
$150,000 a cost. Yeah, everybody likes to forget benefits. It's like amazing. So you take, if you had $150,000 worth of cost, and you know, you've got 2,080 hours in the average work year. 2,000.
I'll make it easy, it's 150, half the work is for application, it's 75,000 a year.
Valid point. I was gonna get into the percentage, but I'm like, it's kind of complicated, that's what I do. So I mean, you've got what I'm saying is you take $75,000 worth of costs, divide that out over, what's the estimated number of applicants per applicant or clientele or planning.
But see,
That's almost. what
But if you get a subdivision and it's got 50 lots, you've also got 150 times that 50 on top of that, on top of this other money, so you would have to subtract that out, so.
Barbara does a report for us every year.
Well, that's why
Look up and
that's
tell
why I
you.
was trying to
Let's
say
look
like.
it up right now. Wait,
Well,
let's tell you how many.
I would challenge anybody to come in and do the agenda.
I will, obviously 300 is no problem. You can
Jeff
negotiate
scanned
more.
every page.
Well.
So I mean, it's.
But I also don't want to get pushback from the public
Yeah, you're
or.
going from 150 to 300, even though you're adding more fees in. It's still an explanation.
And that's still in the lines with Lee, you said that 300?
They do 300,
100,000.
and they just went up from 250.
I mean, if 400, you're talking 187.5 applications. Potentially.
Wow, but you gotta add in 150 for each lot of your subdivision, because that's money collected too, so.
Well, I mean, that's where I guess when you look at it, do you do a prorated amount when you start looking at a subdivision, which is
Because I
what
was
you have
gonna
here?
keep what the additional lot would be, which
Yeah,
is
the 150.
150.
Right.
Well, they come in with a 10 lot subdivision, well, let's say 11 lot subdivision, you're looking at,
So you gotta cover.
You're looking at,
10 times that.
With base fees, let's say, let's say we cover this half of the cost you're talking.
Yeah.
There's a lot thing maybe cover the other half, the town contributes, please, cover at least half the cost. That's unreasonable?
yeah, I don't have, I'm,
So
so I'm just trying to
Base
figure out
fees,
what's that look
cover
like.
roughly half the cost.
So the budget's around 120.
So I'm so far off.
So.
Good while this.
I know, but.
I mean, I've been doing this for a while.
Complaining about 9.6s that seem to be the problem. We had one last year approved.
So if you take,
We had one conditional use permit. This was a slow year. 3 subdivisions, which was a total of 15 lots. 3 lots,
So that was still pandemic effect,
1
right?
parking
Must have
area.
been.
Yeah.
Last year.
We had 10 site reviews. Those are what take a while.
well, if you take a,
But that's part of the.
13 waivers. So you guys need, what's the waivers?
Yes.
So are we trying to determine the rate right now, or is this just discussion?
No, I'm pretty done.
We're saying,
Slight increase.
we're saying she's low.
Okay,
let's take the 125.
so do we want to just say, keep what she's proposing, watch it for a year and see where we're at?
Considering I've been here since 2003 and they've never changed any of it.
Yeah,
Except
Well, I guess that's the only concern is that now become like
It was a lot
20
of-
years from now. or-
Yeah.
No, I think that's a good
Let's go with 300 and
proposal.
watch it.
A lot of other towns like.
Because we have to publish it now in the rules of
Like
procedure, which we
right?
hadn't done before too.
There's different ways.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
I wanna
which
do
was a
that.
new thing that came out.
Yeah.
We'll put an escalator clause in too, so annually, that way you won't wait 10 years.
So no one wants to touch it,
Yeah,
'cause it's like,
honestly,
Of course, you know, it makes sense.
talk about zoning warrant article discussion.
I have 2 comments. Article 8. Even though it's in the past, I don't think I support it. I think right now,
The Lindsay? No. Oh, right.
it says 2 non-residents, right? Oh, yeah,
There's no number on it right now, that's
It
what.
says legal residence.
no, it says two non-residents.
Well, that was what you proposed.
No, it was in, that passed.
Is this number 8 or number 9?
You look at the thing.
I already said 8.
2 non-residents.
It passed, that was one that was.
Oh, that was.
What article,
that's
what
right,
that's in
that's
here
the
now?
one that- those-
No, it failed at 49.14%.
I thought it failed, that's what I thought too.
If you look at the regulations, the 2 non-residents is in there now. non-residents. Yeah, look at this.
Article
Um,
8. Fail, yeah.
Yeah.
There was,
It failed by 20,
It failed, so
25.
it's not in there, that's.
No, but
Right.
the
Well,
the
these
article
are the
said,
ones that failed.
no, John, the article said only by legal residents of the dwelling. I'm saying what we have now says two
Again, the
non-residents.
current,
The current says two non-residents.
I didn't think it said anything.
You know, it says two non-residents. And this proposed only.
No, that's home business. We're
Yeah,
talking
business.
home occupation.
Home occupation.
Yeah, home occupation and home business are two different
Different,
things.
very
You know, home
different.
occupation, we don't list anything about who lived in here. It's supposed to be, a home occupation was supposed to be a guy running a little business out of his home, that's his home.
Right.
Now, this bit where you've got 10 employees, and because we don't have a number that you can have on for employees, now you can have 10, even though home business requires planning board approval and home occupation doesn't.
I think it should just say one thing, home occupation, you have one person that lives there, no other roof. A certain amount of
it says
space.
legal residence.
Well,
I think people will have to done to that.
I think that's what we proposed.
Yeah, by
They
25
have too
votes.
much information
Only
there
25.
I
on
think-
home occupation.
I think there was so much misinformation out there
Oh,
last
yeah.
year, when people
The
get
bond
confused,
stuff,
you vote no.
Yeah.
There was lots of discussion because I was standing at the dump then. People wanted to know if their chicken house and selling chickens was going to be in violation of this zoning.
Well,
So there
there was a lot
was lots of
misinformation
questions about
people got
agricultural use.
If I have a home occupation, let's say my kid doesn't live at my house, why can't I have them come to the house and help?
I agree.
Well, and that was another question that came up.
Legal.
Well, in home business, we allow non-residents, you know.
A home business, yeah, that's.
So I'm thinking, why don't we allow non-residents for home occupation? Why don't we?
That's
maybe
why
one?
I voted against it
Yeah.
before and I vote against it again.
I mean, I think if I got a home occupation and my kid lives somewhere else wants to help.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
Allow us.
that came up a lot.
Grandkids visiting for the summer and you got a hobby and you make birdhouse or something, you can't have the kids.
Or
all
seasonal, you do reefs and the one, yeah, you should have somebody come in and help you.
So do you want to discuss possibly making a change to that line?
Yeah, just take out.
You want, you want to make it tonight, or do you want to have, think about?
I just want to, I want to bring these forward to the
I'm-
board now. We can either discuss them now, discuss them later.
I want to allow.
Plus additional ones that you may have been, that we've gone through the
I
hearing
want
and
to
that John
allow
might go to.
non-residents, like I'm doing in home business. Whatever that number, I'm not locked into two, like we have a home business, but we should allow a non-resident to come to the house and help somebody with their home.
Occupation.
What's the difference
agree.
then?
Within the structures.
They
It says home occupation, John's.
Well, so what you would say, like, members of the foot dwelling?
But what's the
With the
difference?
home business is two non-residents.
I know,
If you
home is
ch-
home, I agree
If
with
you
you.
change you change it from
Whatever. Yeah,
the whole, the residence, the legal residence of the dwelling to anybody, what's the difference between a home occupation and a home business?
I think then it should be a home business, and the planning board should be approving it for the scope of the work. The home occupation, I do. So if someone comes to me and tells me that they're gonna just be operating in the house, they're only gonna use 30% of the house, it's just gonna be me doing this. And then I give them a permit to run that. They got the 6 criteria that's in here, the 6. Yeah, the 6 criteria. They go through, they show me how they're gonna meet each one of those 6 criteria is an area. And if they meet them all, I give them a permit to have that home
But
occupation.
it
It's
should
that simple.
stay inside so many square feet or outside, not the whole area.
And
That's
so
where we
what
got.
happened is, because that was the thing that the zoning board ended up passing on the other ones, they said that it wasn't clear what the parameters was for the home occupation, but the home occupation has a lower threshold than a home business. A home business is actually something bigger than it's typical.
Right.
So the town's attorney, the attorney representing the ZBA, and even the NHA attorney said, you have to look at your zoning as a whole. You can't look at 2 paragraphs and make a decision. And that's what happened in that ZBA decision.
But I still think, back to what I started, I think that a non-resident should be able to come and help the person with the home occupation. I think 0 is,
Then it's a home business. It's not a home occupation anymore. It's a home business.
what's the difference?
Well, that's what.
That's what John-
Look, the definition. What the definition?
The yard can be.
All right, we're gonna be here till midnight.
It's not even 8:30 yet, so.
Well, John,
So we go, so you got, you want to go to page 30, which has the thing for home occupations, which is 7.3.
Yeah, I'm on that. Definitions is.
And the definition
You've
is
done.
what was the home occupation is going to be.
There's too many choices under occupation.
Okay.
Okay, home business and home occupation, the definition.
Page 30, but I'm not sure which section.
So I'll read, because everybody doesn't have the book, so.
Yeah, which section are
Yeah,
you on?
what section?
It's zoning.
Zoning, okay.
Zoning, so you want page 79 is zoning, and you also want page 30 of zoning.
30 and 79.
So the home business is conducted from an owner occupied single family dwelling that may include the use of accessory structures on the property as specified in the provisions of this ordinance. So when you read the home business, you can have a building that's not part of the home that you can use. So then when you go to home occupation, it says the use that is conducted entirely within the dwelling that is clearly incidental and secondary to the use of the dwelling, which does not change the character of said dwelling or its neighboring environment. So that whole thing about being conducted totally inside and stuff, even though the defense attorney says, no, it doesn't say that in your home occupation, it says it in our definition.
Right.
So the ZBA just, I think it was a bad decision, and that's. So because we're trying to tighten up the home occupation to make it clear what a home occupation was, so we don't get all twisted up like we did this last one.
Well, I mean, even we're sitting here all twisted up on it, trying to,
Too much information
Clarify.
to deal with on the two.
Well, even with that though, John, I still think home occupation, having somebody come to your house and help you. should
That's
be
what the
di-
home business.
that's a
is.
business then.
Well, home occupation, it says that within the, let's say I'm doing Christmas
It
trees
doesn't say that.
in
does
my
it?
garage, entirely inside the dwelling.
Are you
Yeah.
doing them? I just want to know.
And I have somebody in the garage. To me, that fits under home occupation.
Yeah, but it
If it's
doesn't
on-
say
it's entirely
it
inside the
needs to
building.
be
It's.
only the
You
legal
know,
resident.
So it's less than 30% of your dwelling.
Yeah, losing that clear.
Okay, you can't go in your garage, because you're supposed to use 30% of your dwelling.
All right, say I do it in my basement.
Okay,
So I'm in my basement, I'm making roofs. Why can't I have my kid help us? I can have the next door kid, help me out.
I'm looking across the lake as he's like lighting bows on fire and things like that.
You have those binoculars.
But on page 30, it doesn't say anything about legal residence, does it?
no.
I don't see it.
The proposal from last year says.
Right.
Oh, that was the change you were trying to make.
Zero.
Got, that's what you're trying to make.
Yeah, and I think that that's a little too far.
And I'm with Ron. I think if I wanted to have a small business doing septic designs in my house and wanted to hire a part-timer to help draft, I should be able to without going through the whole planning board and coming before us and just having John approve it.
Did the attorney look at the wording of legal resident? What is that? Did they have to show you their license that they're legal resident?
Someone that,
Agree
to
with
me,
you. That's.
someone that lives in the house would be a legal resident.
And I'm saying that somebody from outside house should be able to help. I don't think in home occupation.
Yeah, if you have,
You calling that.
So if you're gonna do, so I'm just saying,
No, I-
the devil's advocate, so we go forward. So if you look at under your home business, which takes planning board approval, it says you can have 2 non-residents, so home occupation, maybe 1 non-resident?
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
one's good.
And then when you cross 2,
You cross 2, you're going into a home business?
exactly.
How's that work?
I'd
for
look at
us
that.
then?
well, the legal,
We're trying to get better.
It started as one.
it only
is
lasts by
being
20,
resident.
you gotta just flip
Oh, come
25
on,
years.
Ron wants to do his race and you guys. are-
Well, I can reject it, you know.
I think just a miscommunication, like Joyce said, someone thought if I had chickens, now I gotta do a home business and I gotta go to the planning board?
Or people said, I mean, I can't have my grandson come over and help me with X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of that.
And I think a lot of that was miscommunication. That's not what that is.
Kids.
Let's put it this way.
Hmm?
Every contractor with a pickup truck and a hammer doesn't come into a home occupation.
I know.
business.
You know?
It's not
I
chasing
know.
them down.
Really.
That's
But-
not where they conduct their business.
But you got a
They're just
nasty
going home
neighbor.
at night. They take
Oh, yeah.
their truck home
They
at
fight
night.
with your
They take
neighbor, you
their
mean?
tools home at night. They put some of their tools in the garage. They're not conducting a business out of that house.
What Joyce is saying though is prohibited under this Article 8 prohibits what Joyce is talking about. I can't have my grandson go over and help me. That's what this.
See, I'm a competitor with Ron from the wreath business in December. My grandchildren are older than this.
You're right, not your reason. But, you know, I think what Joyce is talking about, which I heard that pushback too. People have a problem with that, and I think I agree with them that even if I'm at home occupation, I should be able to have somebody who will come over and help me.
So you want to have one non-resident
Yeah.
there and then you can have 2
Yeah.
non-residents for a business?
Yeah.
And then if you got 3 non-residents, you gotta come in as a full-fledged site review. It's no longer a home business or a home occupation.
Mhm.
I just want to make sure that we're all on the same
Okay.
page. how you're looking at it.
Sounds good to me. What are you doing?
So I make a motion that we modify that to one non-resident.
Do we need a motion right now? Or
No.
this is just like, this is discussion.
This is just discussion.
We'll write a note.
Okay, sounds good, right? Okay. And one more thing,
Did you want to go through each one and just?
For fun and non-resident.
Yeah, let's start with
Yeah,
number,
one non-resident.
number 4 was the Lindsay site, not by 4 votes.
That was misunderstanding. Everybody thought that.
Yep.
Steve was actually surprised because he thought people would want the commercial to broaden the tax base, and I think people thought he was being forced into something he didn't.
Yeah, the signs that were
Well,
put up.
no, I
above
think
all
that was
stuff.
because there were signs that were put up that said vote no for this and it had a misnumbering, which is what,
Oh, yeah, okay.
which is why it got voted.
So.
so
Yeah.
four, I think we should
Was
resubmit.
that the
Yeah.
one that had an additional lot?
No, there was
another. Okay, that didn't get, what do you prefer?
There was, which one?
Oh, was that residential lot?
Was it lot 25
The
or
one that got
something?
approved, but it.
Oh, that was that lot way up on,
Orchard Hill.
Orchard Hill Road. It's the one that was on the backside of that subdivision. There's a lot way out in the middle of the woods and it was labeled regional commercial because it touched the other lot. It never should have been zoned regional commercial anyways.
Right.
So
It
that
still
one,
is, isn't it? Because that one didn't.
That one
That
didn't-
didn't change. for whatever
Yeah.
reason.
wow.
But that was
That's
all town
because of-
center up there now, isn't it?
Well, no, it's general residential for that thing, but now you got this in the middle of the woods, you got this one commercial lot sitting there. And that's the guy, when I saw AK, I thought it was, Arkansas, and I called him at like
Oh, okay.
10 o'clock in the morning, and I woke the guy up at like 5 o'clock, because it was Alaska. And he said, to me, "You know what time it is?"
Time to get up.
So I had to do some heavy duty apology. But I did reach out to him, and he said that, I always thought it was a residential lot.
Okay, so before we want to redo it, and that's what we're gonna.
Resubmit.
So one quick question on that. Those two lots, I don't remember them off the top of my head, but they're the ones that,
It's a gravel pit,
right, but don't they abut two residential lots
yes,
down in the end?
but the whole gravel pit, the gravel pit is 2 lots, it's not one lot's a gravel pit, there's 2 lots that's the gravel pit, when you look on the tax map.
Yeah.
So,
Isn't it one,
and they were,
4, isn't that?
and they were both back more than the 500 feet anyways.
Right.
So,
Right.
but when you take a large flat area and you can put a commercial park out there, now, if those other ones where they're zoned, the ones that are zoned residential, is, if you look on the regional commercial thing in the front part of your book, it says that if you're abutting a business in a residential district, then you've got a whole buffer requirement that you got to put in.
Okay.
So there, but if that residential use is in a commercial district, then that buffer requirement doesn't kick in. It's a residential district.
Okay.
It's probably our,
If we had better service here, I'd pull up the map just so I could.
In your book.
it's a pretty long, commercial lot for us in the future, I think, right on.
Right. Oh, no, yeah, I agree.
Some of the residential are on Providence Road.
Yeah, so,
Power would
There's-
be.
Yeah, Brewster Road.
yeah, that was one of them, yeah.
Yeah.
Like, not Brewster, sorry. Yeah.
See if I can figure out.
That's the name of that.
Yeah, that's why I was having a
Yeah.
brain cramp too.
Yeah, I'm like, all of a sudden, like I said, Brewster, and like, stop.
Oh, Bumford.
Bumford, thank you. I knew it started with B. Bumford Road connects out.
Okay, so, all right, if we can. See on the screen, it's not too much glare.
Can't see the white
Right
now.
now.
These screens.
You gotta have an orange mouse.
Yeah.
Mouse.
What's that?
Turn to page 17. It says that standards for the regional commercial district, and it says on any lot that abuts a residential district that is developed for non-residential uses, a buffer of at least 50 feet shall be retained. There's sufficient vegetation to provide a screening between the uses of the adjoining residential district.
Okay.
And that one we recommend that, you know, some.
No, 4-1.
What one?
Be done and then like.
That's right, that's right.
Yeah, like there are the 2 lots.
Yeah.
Yep, yeah.
So it's gone.
What?
And I remember the.
Oh, there it is. There and there.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
before we want to resubmit.
Yep.
8, I think that we got
New wording, right?
new wording on that one.
Yep.
If we do a new wording, I think on 9, I recommend the new wording, just to make it clear. May occupy from 30% of dwellings living to 500 square feet. I think or a maximum of 500 square feet.
I agree.
Is what the,
That's what I thought it was for.
yeah, that was our intent.
Oh, so she wasn't worded quite right.
Yeah, just clarified, I think, so there's no room for
Okay.
down the road.
That lost 56 to 43%. A big hit.
Well, I think a lot of it was, like you say, the Russell effect.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, 10 was, we should redo that one.
That almost lost by 10%.
That was also the bomb effect, I think, you have to have that.
Yep.
Why are you blaming me?
Money for office, huh?
Why are you blaming me?
It's delicious.
You know, don't our regulations for political signs say 30 days before the election?
No. A very interesting.
The stuff on town roads, we don't allow any sign unless it's on their own property. State highway,
Or, but you can put it if the person allows it, right?
on
Okay,
the state highway, the state allows political signs on their right of ways. So those ones that are on the state road, because they're political signs, the state right of way, technically the people own up to the center line of the road, but it's right of way. They're supposed to get permission from them people to put them there, whether they do or not is. And what it says is that signs have to be removed the second Friday after the election. So if you win a primary, you keep them up to go to the next thing. So you got the second Friday from after. There's no time limit on how early you can put them out.
Well, it's two square feet to max.
Political signs, the state law that trumps the town's regulations
Oh, yeah.
states that you can put it in that right away. So there's no sign thing in the whole bit.
Size situation.
Yeah, no, but even the size. Now, our signs, for a temporary sign that you can do without a permit, you can do it under that 2 square feet and do it without a permit, but it's still supposed to be at least 5 feet on your property and maybe farther back depending on the zone you're in. Not out in the right of way, because I mean, technically it's on your property because it's a right of way, but our definition of your front setback says to the edge of the right of way. So our definition doesn't say your property because you own the underlying rights. It says to the edge of the right of way by definition. So any sign in town that's out there in that right of way is against our ordinance, other than the fact if it's on the state highway, the state law trumps this.
All right, so are we gonna stick? Is everyone in favor of redoing 10? Resubmitting 10?
Yes.
Yeah, that's the one, that's where the 10% and the 2,000 square feet, that's the thing.
Now, what about 12? I'm not, Jamie, no, Jamie.
Yeah. Really
I'm
would
not-
like that to go forward.
I'm not in favor of that, but I give it to everybody else.
Which one?
That one has, well, no drugstores.
Oh, no, I'm not in favor of that.
That could be in the village district.
Right now, if you
Like
look
on
on your
Cape
table,
Road.
well, if you look at your, there's a lot of stuff that can go in on Cape Road because of it being the village district.
Yeah.
You're not gonna eliminate all the uses. That village district thing was really intended for that intersection around there, but, some of them lots, because of how they are and how they connect running back and what it would take to put a like a business type use would suck up space.
Right.
That comment that you made at the beginning of that, to put this perspective on what could be there, I thought was very beneficial.
Right.
So we're not supporting 12? We're not supporting 12? I don't support 12.
I don't support that.
Just changing it from a permitted use to a condition, to permitted by
Because you
condition.
could go on Malibu Road, typically, or Cape Road.
Yeah, so if you go to your table of uses now, let's see what it's doing.
Right, it would be permitted, they're just. Permit.
He's getting his conditional use would require. By hearing, right now.
This is what.
Right, it's just a right, it's a right by permit.
Right, and I
Where,
don't know if you want those on a, who would put one on there, but I
Oh, he
think John's
wants to
right.
change
You're really talking about the
But-
intersection off the six, the shot, you know,
So what's the difference?
the fire department building.
I would imagine with malls that are conditional.
right,
Yeah, but that's not saying. it's
Yeah, so the
not-
village district, your town center and your regional commercial, So even your regional commercial, you'd have to get a conditional use permit for? But you can put any other store you want there, is it permitted, right?
Exactly.
So we're just calling out
Well,
drugstores.
I don't know if I would necessarily, I guess the way I look at it is, what do you want to be permitted and what do you want to be conditional use? It's really the bigger question, and I don't know if I would try and limit it to one piece or another. I would try and look at saying anything in, right, this area is all conditional use.
Well, he wanted to do conditional, right now, the way this is written, it was conditional use in every single zone, including the regional commercial. So if someone wanted to put it on 125 or Route 4,
Right.
they would have to get a conditional use. But you could do a regular store out there without having a conditional use. You can have it as a permitted grant.
This was, Jamie had this thing against, Walgreens and stuff.
Yeah.
And you can't say you can't have, yeah, you can't say, I don't want Walgreens, you have it. So he just did it, all drugstores, because they didn't.
What was the rationale for putting Malago and Kate into this district, which is all residential? Why isn't it in?
Because if you look on-
Neighborhood residential, where you could do something.
Well, you could, if you want to change that zoning, you guys have a right to look at that and do this in this next cycle to say, we
Yes.
want that to be like the neighborhood residential.
They
So
put
what-
it like the trailer guy in.
Yeah, so what happened is when we created the town center and then, it used to be, before it became the town center and then the village district, we used to have, the, village district.
Yeah.
Which encompassed the whole thing. And it was too big a district, because if you look at what the village and the town center together is, and we're trying to do the whole thing like to build out a downtown.
Yeah.
And that was part of that whole thing where, when they did that, Stan Tech did that whole design thing to try to create a downtown. And that's when we changed our zoning. So what happened is, to make it work by all the statistics that come out, said you had to make a smaller downtown area. So that's when they took that very center and made that the town center zone. And then they made the outside of stuff around it, and a lot of it, the village district where it had that high density residential that you changed last year. That was done that way on purpose, because they said for businesses to buy in the town center, you need residential housing closer together around it to support that town center, and that's why that density came in place, to try to create a downtown. Now, with that said, that whole concept of creating a downtown, the general population right now in Barrington could care less about a downtown. We really don't want a downtown. We want to stay a rural town.
Of course.
So do you still want to keep trying to make a town center? And part of the reason why we're having a hard time developing the town center is because the PUD requirements and the stringency between them. And we actually brought through a warrant article, was it 5 years ago, 6 years ago, where all the stuff like Oak Hill and all that stuff coming in there.
Yeah,
To
the
take
Oak
all
Hill is
that,
full of
to
that.
take all of that and put that into general residential, and the people voted against it.
I think we should bring that one back.
I think so too. I think, because right now, that's never gonna be developed.
It's general residential
So
to
the-
look at,
the other-
there is no-
The problem that we run into here with this is the way it's currently structured. What's gonna happen is it'll get built out. It'll get built out in the most economical way that is reasonable right now, which right now is this cluster type residential.
Right.
The problem is if you want the commercial component to it and you're trying to make a walkable center, it won't happen. You're 50 to 75 years away from it, because basically you have to use up the life cycle of the buildings that are gonna be in there before anybody's willing to say,
Right.
I'll buy it, tear it down and build something
I
new.
think Knights is gonna be there at that price and another 30 or 40 years still there. Nobody's gonna pay
Potentially-
1.8 million.
It potentially could be, but that's the problem that you run into with the way that this is currently,
Yeah.
the language, the way it's configured now.
And the board had an issue with it years ago, and we tried to make some changes, and it got voted down against.
And even with the density we're talking about now, with the what rates we have, it's not enough to drive downtown. You're not.
No, we don't.
You're not gonna create it
You're
down.
not gonna create it.
You look at the figures they put out, they're talking about 10,500 people in 25 years. Grafton County, I guess it was the state Office of Planning and Development, they have our future build out rate.
We'll be
Very, I know we should be a lot more, because it's been growing 75 people a year in the
Yeah.
last 10 years.
Would,
And the latter part, they was growing at 43 years, and their explanation is you just have a very older population. Instead of being 48 years old now, they probably think everybody's gonna be 50 years old, which is not true with all the new people, so.
I think people's mentality about a downtown area has changed.
I think so too. I think so. I think
Nobody's looking for it.
Nobody
at
wants to
one
look
time,
like
everybody
Lee Circle,
wanted, we
right?
wanted downtown, we wanted to have our established thing. That was a big push when we did our master plan. Everybody come out. That's what people said they wanted. I think you're right. I think the general public now. It's
I
a
want
drive-in-
downtown, I
it's a
go to
drive-in.
Portsmouth or Dover.
Yeah, right.
If
And
we,
that's,
if we really wanted it downtown, we would have spent the money to buy some land in the center of town.
Exactly.
Rather than put it on 125, we got land for free.
And we didn't buy that piece of land that's, with the ball field, but.
right, that come up like 3 times or 4 times, the town divided and did
2,000, the town voted that.
It's aspirational, but when you put the dollars down, we don't do it.
And then that guy from Dover bought it for 300,000.
Right.
Real.
Yeah, and they're looking at possibly trying to do something. They're in the negotiation things with us. It's still too preliminary for you guys to get involved with it because.
Yeah.
Like I said, we work with people sometimes 2, 3, 4, 5 months before anything even comes to you guys. You'd be surprised how much time we put into different things before it even comes to this board.
And if you look at people are not even close enough to be able to get into a usable downtown, so then you
Then
need.
you gotta drive to it. So when you drive to it, now you gotta.
You need a huge parking lot
Right.
if there was anything. right?
And that doesn't exist now.
Well, for me, I was saying the meeting, then made best planning. When I drive down Beauty Hill, for me to turn left to go down to, the town center, or go right to go to the Lee Plaza, I'm going right to the Lee Plaza, where Market Basket is, where I get my haircut, where I go to the gym, where I go to the Rite Aid, that's where I'm going. I'm not gonna turn left. I don't care how much you put in downtown. I'm turning left, I'm going to the Lee traffic circle, and I'm going to the plaza there. There's a Walmart across the street, there's a Verizon, there's a bank, there's a
We have a wall.
Subway, I mean, we're not gonna be.
Oh, okay, I was like, there's a Walmart in Lee, where? I missed that one.
Walgreens. So we're away with 12.
Correct.
Got it, okay.
That's what it sounds like.
Yes.
Yeah.
One I would like to consider adding is, we talked, is it Iron Rock and stuff, and they had a gravel, parking lot, which is allowed.
Oh, yeah, we discussed that.
We discussed that I didn't like,
Rock out in
125 is-
welding.
to me, is our front yard, and that's our busiest road, that's what people get an impression of Barrington. I don't like businesses with gravel parking lots on 125. And I would like to change that,
Have to,
yes, with the support of
have to
board.
have paid.
Everyone's gotta be paid.
On the
That's
regional
actually,
commercial.
yeah, but isn't that actually in your site review regulations? I don't think that's in the zoning,
Yeah,
was it?
Well, they didn't ask for a.
Less than 20, then remember, the less than 20.
Yeah, but that's in your site review. That isn't something you bring forward with zoning. That's something you guys would change.
I
in
hope
public hearing.
Oh, it's like, yeah.
Oh, that's it.
Yeah, I guess you're right.
And I wouldn't support that.
You wouldn't?
No. I think that's a burden on a small business that some can't afford.
And they're not
Small,
used to
small,
this.
and-
Small things going Route 9, go somewhere else. I mean, there's plenty of other properties that are cheaper than 125.
Well, not necessarily.
Yeah.
I
Well,
mean,
that one there.
if you get a junk lot like he did, doing another $30,000 for paving is a lot.
Well,
And
And you had to be really creative to make that lot work.
Exactly.
well, and
Yeah, you paid nothing for it.
This-
You had to be very
$1,000
creative
for
to
a lot.
make it work.
But this goes back to Ken Grossman being here talking about your setbacks from your wetlands. And you take that lot and you suddenly pave that, the amount of impervious pavement you have that's now flooding off into the wetlands versus having gravel which perks. Now you're creating a much bigger impact on your wetlands if you.
I just think it's a bad look. I think it's a bad look. 125 is,
Are they talking?
I hate that, Bob's got construction in there.
If they're going south towards Lee, it's before the Lee.
You're so far out at that
Like,
point, like, it's
gonna be
still,
put
if you look at Pierce Road and all that.
Except the storage, he
everything up there
does
is
the
still
equipment
rural.
right there on site, and he's
Oh,
placed
it's
the
all still
storage.
ag nature.
And
You
eventually.
I just think when you drive on 125, that's the rest you get. I think we could do. We can always wait if someone comes in for some reason, but I think it should be paved.
That's a site review issue anyway, stuff.
So,
There was a couple other things that came up on zoning and, we were trying to think about them to get them put together too. And when Vanessa brought it up to me today, I remember we had a couple of things, but I couldn't remember what they were.
So there was a long discussion when the Union Peach folks were here about temporary lighting and how to do,
That's in
or
your site review
movable.
too.
okay. And this came up with the tech committee, that when developers put down utility underground lines and conduits,
Yeah.
then when the homeowner gets in there and wants to lay cable, there's no room in those pipes. Yeah,
Okay.
so they now have to dig another trench, and so it's a big expense for the
So what comes down is, I'm old school, I grew up in the building school, I've built a drink, me and Bob had this discussion last week. It says you gotta have a means of communication. So communication now can be satellite TV, cell phones, everything else, so it changes. Me and Bob have that old school thing where you run two communication underground conduits, right in your same ditch lines, so you got two 2-inch lines available to your house at all times, so you can add anything you want in the future. Is it required anymore in the building code? No. Bob ran one, and his guys were telling me on staff one, and what the code says is he only needs that one. But a good developer,
Would like to, right?
because as Bob said, there wasn't that much of savings, because
You got the trench there.
well, yeah, the site work and getting the thing all dug, the extra few pieces of 2-inch pipe is not that costly.
No,
It actually saved me $1,200.
Well, pipe's gonna go up. Really,
I,
$1,200
because I returned it.
And that driveway was normal length, it wasn't
It was
huge.
230 feet.
Wow. Pipe's really gone up.
Mm-hmm.
Bought a piece to roll my dock, it's like $80 for a piece of 4 inches,
Yeah.
80-something bucks, like, you can't, holy.
Spent $400 on like 2 2x4s, a few 2x6s and some.
I know some of that stuff's gone up. I didn't realize that conduit had gone up that much.
Okay.
So, my.
But that would be something that if somebody were building, they could request their builder do. In this circumstance that John and I are talking about, the developer had already put the conduit at the pole and stubbed it up the driveway, and they only did one 2-inch and one 3-inch. And then they had a conduit, a culvert running over it, so it was a big deal to add a second 2-inch.
Right.
So that's why I asked John's
Right.
opinion about.
So does the typical homeowner know to request that?
Probably no,
Probably not.
Yeah.
no, that.
You have to hire a quality builder.
Even when you get into commercial applications, same thing. I can't tell you how many times, like, you have to specifically request cleanouts or the way certain things are run so that it like pipes up and over as opposed to just dropping straight down. Like if you don't know to ask,
Yeah,
you won't get it. You will get whatever is the cheapest, easiest way for them to do
Right.
it most of the time.
so you're saying it's in the building code, so we don't have,
You gotta have a communication circuit, is what it says. The ability to have a communication circuit. So if you can run that pipe, most of the people now, because of satellite phone, TVs and cell phones, that pipe stays empty. They never let anything in.
well, see, with fiber coming to town, I guess that's how that will happen.
But even with the fiber, really, if you run one pipe with that fiber optic cable, you can do your computer, your telephone, you can do everything all off that one fiber optic cable. So you can run that all in one.
So, well, I don't know, all I know is that they were talking in the committee that there wouldn't necessarily be room to put the fiber in the pipe.
If they had one 2-inch line going in, I would eliminate what was in there and pull that fiber optic
Right.
through. So why would you keep the other stuff? Because the fiber optic can do so much more.
You pull out, which you wrap it and then you.
Yeah,
pull out.
why would you leave an old
Pull the
telephone
fiber
line in
in.
or an old cable line in there that if you're putting in fiber optics, you can get all that stuff.
Right.
And if it's an old analog line, it won't
It's
even work,
worthless
it
anyway.
won't even work
Yeah.
anymore. Nobody can
just
just
the
connect.
copper's worth something.
That's it. Yeah.
Okay,
Actually, some of them are aluminum.
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody else has any, what I'd like to see is everybody make a proposal or write up, like, reference the zoning area you would like to amend. And then what your recommendation is and come prepared to talk about it. And that's, well.
Work session.
Let's put the next-
work session.
So work session, so, for rescheduling the October 18th, we could still have the work session. But it would not be here, so voting as well as.
Special election.
So it's from, is it 8 to 7?
8 to 7.
8 to 7.
Then the voting as well, and the open house.
Yeah.
So,
Whatever you want.
the option is not, that we can't use this facility during that time. Have Alice aware, or we can reschedule the work session for another Tuesday.
wait, so next meeting,
I mean, I'm not looking at Tuesday, big meeting.
Yeah.
the planning board.
Normally I would probably be all about like, do the one meeting, but I feel like there's a lot of things to be working on from now until then, because I also have the CIP
Should we look
that
at,
was to do too, so.
should we look at the It was gonna be the 18th, so she'll do the 25th. Which is just the week after.
Is the 25th the third Wednesday? If it's the third Wednesday, you got a CBA.
It's not a Wednesday, it's a Tuesday.
Tuesday.
Oh, the week
That would be
after. I
the
thought you
fourth
said Wednesday.
The fourth Tuesday.
Tuesday. Who's in here?
Get ready for hell.
Have our regular scheduled meeting,
Right,
or the public hearing meeting on November first.
first. Be the following.
Go to, can we change it, or do we have to change it at the public hearing? We change the date for work session.
No, we can change that.
You can post it, you can post the date, as long as you get your posting out, you know, the posting time. If
Yeah,
it
but
was
then
a continued,
again,
if it was a,
the next week, the next Tuesday in November voting, when do they vote? November?
but they don't go here, they go to school.
Yeah, but
It's November eighth,
Yeah, that would be. the
that's when I
8th.
don't have school, that's, yeah. That's the eighth.
well, I don't know, last time they changed the meeting time
Yeah.
later.
And I can tell you
That's
November
right,
8th, there are
we did.
parent
We
parent
did.
conferences, parent teacher conferences.
It is that, so I did.
November 8th.
Oh, yeah, I can't make it.
Oh, that'd be good for me. My wife's busy anyways.
You can cross that bridge when you get to it.
That's, I've gotten to the point where if I don't put it on my calendar, I don't know what the heck is going on. So,
So where we at
Talk to
with
me
next
as a
meeting?
parent, isn't it?
So is the consensus on the 25th?
Yeah. Do you need, I think we need to vote for that.
Make a motion to move the 18th work session to the October 25th.
Second. I'll be in.
Yeah.
Oh, I.
Hawaii.
Roll call.
Oh, nice.
Masucci, aye.
Happy LI.
Andy and I.
Bye-bye. Thank you all for your support and flexibility.
I almost wrote it down.
This, I saw you really.
You can still come the 18th, walk in the building if you would like.
Yeah,
Take our survey.
Yeah.
I hope you
Give you a
do. I hope you
worker.
all come and vote. This is an important vote. Show support for the
All
town.
right.
The
I
second.
think motion
November, too
adjourned.
late. That goes
I second.
to you.
Geez,
So-
okay.
So we have the deliberative session, but it's 2 parts, I think.
Here said.
Masucci, aye.
Yeah, but you know, if nobody wants to vote.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, yeah,
The
aye.
amendment. To support.
Yeah.
Continue the employment of Connor.
As long as you want.
But